My name's Carter, and I'm 29. I live in New York now, not just anywhere, but in a penthouse overlooking Central Park. Floor-to-ceiling windows, polished marble, my own private elevator. But if you asked my family, they'd probably still describe me as Vanessa's quiet little brother. Not because I am quiet, but because they never really listened. I guess every family has their favorite. Ours didn't even pretend to hide it. Vanessa, my older sister by 2 years, has always been the golden child. Since birth, she was the first one to walk, the one who got a solo in the school musical, the girl with the perfect prom dress. And me? I was the kid who didn't need much. That was Mom's way of justifying things. Carter doesn't mind, she'd say with a wave of her hand whenever someone questioned why Vanessa got yet another gift, or why my birthday was just a small dinner at home, while hers was a backyard carnival with a rented DJ and ice sculpture. It was like watching someone be handed the sun while you're told, hey, there's still starlight. That counts too, right? I didn't resent Vanessa at first. Not when we were little. She was just my big sister, and I thought she was cool. She painted her nails in weird colors, blasted music in her room, and taught me how to tell fake friends from real ones. But over time, it changed. She started treating me the same way everyone else in our family did, like I was some background prop in the movie of her life. Smiling when the camera was on, dismissing me when it wasn't. My mom, Janice, didn't help. She was obsessed with appearances. Holiday cards had to be color-coordinated. Social media posts were curated like museum exhibits. And Vanessa? She was the centerpiece. The future doctor, the beauty with brains, the pride of the family. I still remember Mom bragging at Thanksgiving dinner. Vanessa got into Cornell. Early decision. Then, almost as an afterthought, she turned to me and said, Carter, are you still doing computer stuff? I had just landed my first paid internship at a software startup, but I didn't say anything. I just smiled and passed the gravy. That was the game. Stay quiet, stay small, stay out of the way. I got good at it. Until I didn't. Things started shifting after college. I moved to the city, said I was working IT, which was technically true, but I was also building software on the side. 2 years later, I had my own company. No loans, no help, just code, coffee, and nights spent debugging until my eyes stung. I didn't tell my family, not because I was hiding it, but because they never really asked. I think the first time Vanessa noticed I might have changed was at Dad's retirement dinner. It was at some overpriced country club. We were all crammed around a long table under crystal chandeliers. Vanessa showed up 30 minutes late in a white designer dress like she was walking a red carpet, not coming to honor the man who paid for her tuition. My parents immediately stood up to greet her. My aunt scooted over to make room. Dad clapped like she descended from heaven. I just sat there, sipping my drink. When she finally noticed me, she tilted her head and said, "Oh wow, Carter, you've grown into your face." I smiled. "And you've grown into your personality." There was a beat of silence, and then she laughed. Like it was a joke, but I meant it. Later that night, as we toasted my dad, Vanessa gave a speech. Long, flowery, dramatic. She quoted Shakespeare at one point, called him my hero, my rock. Everyone clapped. Then my mom nudged me. "Say a few words, sweetie." I stood up, kept it short. Thanked Dad for teaching me how to work hard, stay disciplined, and be independent. Simple, but true. As I sat back down, I heard Vanessa whisper to her boyfriend, "He's so awkward." And they both laughed. Loud enough for me to hear. Loud enough for everyone to pretend they didn't. That night, I walked to the parking lot alone while Vanessa was surrounded by relatives and friends taking selfies. The thing is, I could have afforded to leave in a town car. I could have flown home in a helicopter if I wanted. But I still drove the same used Honda I bought 5 years ago. Just because I'd outgrown them didn't mean I was done with them. Not yet. Then came Grandma's 80th birthday. Grandma Dottie is the only one in the family who ever treated me like I mattered. She used to mail me books when I was little, sci-fi novels, old computer manuals, with little notes in the margins like, "I don't understand this, but I bet you will." We weren't close, but we had a quiet bond. She saw me. I didn't want to miss her big day. It was a huge gathering at this fancy winery just outside the city. My mom planned it like it was the royal wedding. Matching family shirts, coordinated speeches, a slideshow spanning 8 decades of Grandma's life. Vanessa was, of course, the MC. She wore a pale pink dress and heels that clicked loudly on the wooden floors. Her voice boomed through the mic. She cried at least 3 times during her intro. "This woman raised us," she said dramatically, "and taught me what it means to be a woman of strength and grace." She looked at me when she said grace, then looked away just as fast. I stood near the back with a glass of sparkling water. Quiet. Watching. People circulated, gossiping, laughing. My cousin Maya came over and said, "Hey, is it true you're working in tech? Vanessa said you fix routers or something." I laughed. "Something like that." Then my uncle, Uncle Greg, joined us. "You still in that tiny apartment in Brooklyn?" I shrugged. "Nah, moved." "Oh yeah? Queens. Manhattan." He raised an eyebrow. "Manhattan? That's not cheap." "We're in Manhattan." I took a sip of my drink. "Upper West." He whistled. "Must be a shoebox." I looked out the window for a second. "Penthouse." They both blinked. Maya laughed. "You're messing with us." I smiled. "Nope. Top floor. 2 balconies. Got a pretty clear view of Central Park." I didn't say it to show off. It just came out. For once, I didn't downplay it. Across the room, I saw Vanessa freeze mid-conversation. Her head whipped around. My mom's wine glass trembled in her hand. Uncle Greg stared at me like he was recalibrating the entire image he had of who I was. Like I'd stepped out of the shadows and ruined their favorite painting. Then it happened. My mom, who never drank more than 1 glass, suddenly lifted hers and threw it. Red wine splashed across the floor in a perfect arc. She didn't say a word, just stormed toward the back patio like she needed air. Vanessa looked furious, but it wasn't confusion on her face. It was panic. And then Uncle Greg, usually loud and opinionated, said quietly, almost like he was thinking aloud, "Huh, I guess we backed the wrong kid." That was when the room truly went silent. People turned. Grandma blinked. Vanessa's cheeks flushed. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one being ignored. I was the center of gravity. And I hadn't even started yet. I didn't say anything for a while after that night. Just left the winery with a tight smile and a slow walk back to my car while the rest of them fumbled around in damage control. I didn't owe them an explanation. Not then. Not after decades of pretending I didn't exist unless they needed something moved, fixed, or paid for. But that moment, the wine throw, the silence, Uncle Greg's accidental truth, it was a crack in the wall. And once a wall cracks, it doesn't stay up for long. 2 days later, my mom called. She didn't ask how I was. She didn't apologize for hurling a $14 glass of Merlot across the room in front of 70 family members and friends. She just went straight into it, her voice tight, like she was holding her breath. "Carter, you really should have told us." "About the penthouse." I leaned back on my couch, one leg over the other, staring out at the city skyline through my window. "Why? You weren't interested when I got my first apartment." She ignored that. "It just caught everyone off guard. You made your sister look bad." There it was. "Not, you embarrassed me, but you made Vanessa look bad." I held the phone to my ear and just let it sit there for a second. "Is that what this is about?" Mom's voice hardened. "Don't act like you don't know what you did." I told Uncle Greg where I live. He asked. I answered. "You knew how it would make her feel. She's been under a lot of pressure lately. Her residency applications." "Mom," I interrupted. "She's 29. Same age as me. We're adults. She's doing something important with her life." And I wasn't. That was the implication. Has always been. If I wasn't carrying a stethoscope or quoting Shakespeare at parties, I wasn't worth acknowledging. I hung up not long after that. Politely. Calmly. But my chest burned for hours. The next week, I got a text from Vanessa. "Vanessa, just wanted to say congrats. Mom said you got a nice place." Me. "Thanks. Vanessa, hope it's not too much pressure, having to keep up with something that expensive in the city." Me. "Hope med school isn't too much pressure, pretending you still like patience." She didn't respond. I'll admit, I was a little petty there. But it wasn't just a jab. It was a reference. One I knew she'd understand. Years ago, before she started med school, Vanessa confessed to me, after a couple glasses of cheap wine on my couch, that she didn't even like medicine anymore. She'd picked it because of Mom. Because our family worshipped the idea of having Dr. Vanessa on holiday cards. She wanted to paint. She used to sketch these incredible portraits, full of color and emotion. But she buried that. Because being an artist wasn't prestigious enough. Being herself wasn't good enough. She chose their approval over her own happiness. Maybe that's the only thing we had in common. Except I eventually stopped chasing it. She didn't. A few months passed. I didn't go home for Thanksgiving. Didn't get invited, actually. Mom sent a group text to the family, complete with a flyer-style invitation she made in Canva. Giving thanks with the tailors, dress code, autumn tones, it was nauseating. Vanessa's name was listed right under the hosted by, in a fancy italic font. My name wasn't on it, not even in the body. So I replied, just to test the waters. What should I bring? No response. Not for hours. Then finally, from my mom. Actually, it's going to be a small gathering this year. Just immediate family. Immediate family. Like I was extended. I scrolled through the group list. There were cousins and great aunts on it. People I hadn't seen since I was 12. But I wasn't invited. Not officially. Not really. Vanessa didn't say a word. And that's when something shifted inside me. Before, I'd been annoyed. Hurt, sure. But still grounded. Still rational. I figured they'd always overlook me. That was the pattern. But this was something else. This was erasure. I stared at that message for a long time. And then I did something petty again. I ordered a Thanksgiving meal from a Michelin-starred restaurant. Full spread, truffle stuffing, aged duck, dessert flight, the whole 9 yards. And I posted a single picture on Instagram. My table, beautifully set for one, against the backdrop of the Manhattan skyline. No caption, just the photo. Vanessa viewed it. So did Mom. And Grandma. No one liked it. But I knew they saw it. That was enough. Christmas was worse. Not only was I not invited, they lied to me. Around mid-December, Vanessa texted, "Hey, just so you're in the loop, we're keeping it simple this year. Everyone's doing their own thing. No big family Christmas." I said, "Cool. Hope you enjoy it." Christmas morning, I got curious. Just a hunch. So I checked Facebook. Vanessa had gone live. There she was, in a giant living room decked out in gold ornaments, standing in front of a 10-foot Christmas tree surrounded by piles of wrapped gifts. My mom and dad were in matching pajamas. Grandma was there, holding her classic spiked eggnog. Cousins, aunts, even Uncle Greg. Everyone. Except me. I didn't watch the whole video. Just enough to feel the knot in my stomach harden into something sharp. Just enough to hear someone, I think it was my mom, say in the background, "It's better without Carter's mood." That one stuck. I didn't text them. Didn't call. Just shut the app and sat there in silence. The lights from my own tree reflecting off the windows. Alone, but strangely clear-headed. Because something broke that day. And sometimes, when something breaks, you stop tiptoeing. You stop shrinking yourself to fit into their frame. And instead, you start building your own. It didn't happen overnight. But that moment, that fake-out Christmas, that was the last time I let myself be the quiet one in the background. And I wish I could say it ended there, that I just cut them off and moved on. But no, the real betrayal hadn't happened yet. That came in spring. March, to be exact. Just as the snow started to melt and the air in Manhattan turned sharp with possibility. I got a call from Grandma Dottie. She rarely called. Usually just sent postcards, sometimes an email with no subject line. But this time she called. "Carter, honey," she said, her voice warm but shaky. "I need a favor." "Anything," I said immediately. "I need you to come with me to the lawyer's office." That was new. "Are you okay?" "Oh, I'm fine. Just getting my affairs in order." "Thought you should be there. I'm changing some things." I didn't press. Just told her I'd meet her. When I showed up, she gave me a long hug and told me how proud she was. Said she saw my photo in some business article. "Your company was in Forbes," she whispered like it was a secret. I smiled. "You read Forbes now?" "I read everything if it mentions my grandson." We sat in a quiet office overlooking the Hudson while her lawyer, a sharp woman in her 60s, went through a revised will. I didn't even know Grandma had that much to leave. But apparently, she did. A house, stocks, old paintings, some cash accounts. And she had left the majority of it. Not to my mom, not to Vanessa, but to me. I didn't know what to say. I didn't ask for it. I didn't want to be in the middle of anything. Grandma just patted my hand and said, "You've always made your own way. No one gave you anything. This is just me giving back." I swallowed. "You sure this won't cause problems?" She laughed, dry and small. "Oh, honey, the problems already exist." A week later, Vanessa found out, and everything exploded. I didn't find out how Vanessa learned about the will changes right away. I'd never been told explicitly to keep it quiet, but Grandma and I had a mutual understanding. We weren't broadcasting it. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about money. It was about acknowledgement. Legacy. A quiet thank you from the only person in my family who ever really saw me. But Vanessa didn't see it that way. It started with a text. Vanessa, we need to talk. Now. I stared at it for a minute before responding. Me. Everything okay? Vanessa, did you manipulate Grandma? I blinked. Literally laughed out loud. The accusation was so absurd I thought it had to be a joke. But I knew her tone. I knew how sharp she could be when she was cornered, like a fox with a law degree. Her claws came out when control slipped through her fingers. Me. Excuse me. Vanessa, I just spoke to Mom. She heard from Aunt Celia, who heard from Grandma's neighbor, who saw you leaving her lawyer's office. So I'll ask again, what did you do? Me. I didn't do anything. Grandma made her own choices. Vanessa, don't be smug. This isn't over. And just like that, she went nuclear. The next few weeks were quiet on the surface, but behind the scenes, I started getting waves of subtle backlash. My mom stopped replying to my texts entirely. Not even a passive-aggressive thumbs up. My dad, who usually played the neutral middleman, called and left a message that was just a long sigh followed by, I hope you're happy. Then came the email. It was long. Too long. Clearly written after days of stewing. Maybe even a few therapy sessions. Subject line, you need to understand what you've done. Vanessa outlined every perceived injustice she had suffered. How she had carried the family legacy. How she had sacrificed years of her life to study medicine while I played around with apps. How Mom had bent over backward to keep the peace between us, and how I had shattered that peace with one selfish act. I reread the line 3 times. You manipulated Grandma when she was vulnerable. That one hit hard. Not because I believed it, but because I realized she did. She truly believed I'd somehow schemed my way into Grandma's, well, like a soap opera villain. That I'd hovered over an elderly woman, whispering poison into her ear. She couldn't imagine that someone in the family, someone not named Vanessa, could be chosen simply because they deserved it. It cracked me open in a weird way. Hurt, yes. But more than that, clarity. That was the first time I fully accepted that she didn't see me as a person. Not really. She saw me as a narrative obstacle. A shadowy footnote. And now, I'd stepped out of line and taken up too much space. And the family followed her lead. That spring was cold. Not just literally. New York was still shaking off winter, but emotionally. I went days without a single message from home. No one called to ask how I was doing. No invites. No thinking of you texts. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just overlooked. I was excluded. And yeah, it got to me. More than I care to admit. There were nights I just sat in my penthouse. This beautiful, ridiculous place I'd dreamed about owning since I was a broke 21-year-old with duct-taped shoes. And I felt hollow. Like I'd built this life, climbed out of the mud, and planted a flag, only to realize no one cared. Worse, they resented me for it. I stopped checking Instagram. Stopped taking phone calls from unknown numbers. I went into what I called maintenance mode. Wake up, shower, work, gym, sleep. On repeat. No joy. Just survival. The lowest point came in late April. I was supposed to be a guest speaker at a startup conference. Nothing huge. A side event at some WeWork-style venue. But the organizer knew me from a forum I'd helped moderate back in the day, and she'd invited me to talk about scaling a product team. I said yes. But that morning, I woke up, stared at the mirror, and couldn't do it. Couldn't move. Couldn't put on the nice blazer or the fake smile or the confident voice I usually summon from nowhere. Instead, I emailed the organizer and made up an excuse. Said I had a fever. Food poisoning. Anything to not show up. Then I sat on the floor of my kitchen, back against the cabinet, lights off, while the city pulsed around me, alive and uncaring. That was the bottom. And from there, something unexpected happened. I broke, but not in the way I feared. I let go of their voices, of the expectations, of the idea that I'd ever be good enough for them, or that I needed to be. It started small. I took a long walk through Central Park without my phone, sat on a bench for an hour, and just watched strangers pass. Then I went into a bookstore and bought a novel, fiction, not business. Something about time travel and regret. I read it in 2 days. I started saying yes to things again. Quiet things. Coffee with an old college friend who worked in nonprofit tech. A dinner invite from my neighbor who always asked about the view from my balcony. I stopped performing. Just showed up. As myself. I called Grandma one night, and we talked for 3 hours. Not about wills or money. Just life. She told me about her first job as a switchboard operator and how she used to knit during her breaks. I told her I'd started sketching again, something I hadn't done since high school. Send me one, she said. So I did. It was rough. A charcoal drawing of the skyline at dusk. But she framed it. You've got your own way of seeing the world, she told me. Never let anyone take that from you. Something shifted after that. Work got better. Not because anything changed, but because I did. I started mentoring younger devs on our team. Took pride in helping them find their footing. I stopped obsessing over the next milestone and started enjoying the ones I'd already reached. Then one day, I got a message from a woman named Tara. She was a producer at a documentary startup, one of those edgy, human stories-only companies with a niche cult following. She'd seen my name on a Forbes list and dug deeper. Saw the interviews I'd done, the open-source libraries I'd helped build. She wanted to do a short feature on me. The quiet founder, she called me. The anti-spotlight tech guy. I hesitated. Part of me still flinched at the thought of being seen. But another part, a newer, stronger part, leaned in. We filmed for a week. Nothing fancy. Just me in my apartment, walking through the city, talking about building things when no one's watching. About being invisible, and how sometimes that's where the real work gets done. It went viral. Not overnight, but slowly. The way good things grow. The comment section was full of people saying they felt seen. That they related. That they too had been overlooked in their families. That my story made them feel less alone. I cried. Not dramatically. Just quietly, sitting in the dark, laptop open, reading strangers say the words I'd waited my whole life to hear from my own family. That was when I realized something. I didn't need their permission to matter. I never did. But still, just when I'd found peace, just when I'd stopped caring what they thought, Vanessa came back. And this time, she didn't come alone. She brought lawyers. She brought accusations. And she brought a storm I didn't see coming. When Vanessa re-entered my life, she didn't knock. She kicked the door open with paperwork. It started with a letter from a law firm I'd never heard of. The envelope was thick and heavy, with that smug embossed logo at the top. I remember holding it in my hands for a moment, just staring at my name in sharp black ink. Carter D. Taylor. There was something cold about it. Final. Like someone had taken a highlighter to my life and decided this was the chapter where the villain enters. The letter was full of legalese, but the gist was simple. Vanessa was contesting Grandma Dottie's will. Her claims? That grandma wasn't of sound mind. That I had exerted undue influence. That I had manipulated her, a frail, elderly woman, into rewriting her estate. I sat on my couch for a while, that stupid letter open in my lap, just breathing. Not even thinking yet. Just breathing. Then I started to laugh. Not because it was funny, but because it was exactly what I should have expected. This was Vanessa's endgame. If she couldn't control the story, she'd rewrite it in court. I called Grandma, told her about the letter. She was quiet for a moment, then let out this dry chuckle. I was wondering when she'd pull something like that. She's saying you weren't of sound mind, I said gently. Please, Grandma replied. I was more lucid at 80 than your mother was at 40. That made me smile. But it didn't change the situation. If this dragged on, it could get messy, expensive, public. And Vanessa knew that. She was betting I'd fold, that I'd get tired, that I'd walk away to preserve my peace. She didn't realize something had changed. I wasn't playing defense anymore. For most of my life, I had responded to my family's treatment by shrinking, getting smaller, softer, easier to dismiss. But now, I was done being quiet. And if she wanted a war, I wasn't going to fight it like a victim. I was going to fight it like someone who had finally learned to stand up. So I hired a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, Clara Liu. Clara was recommended by one of the startup founders I'd mentored. She wasn't flashy, didn't wear power suits or carry a Prada bag, but she was surgical, calm, methodical, terrifying in cross-examination. She met me at a coffee shop near Bryant Park, shook my hand firmly, and said, "You ready to play the long game?" I was. We got to work. The first thing Clara did was pull the medical records, the ones Grandma had voluntarily submitted during her estate meeting. Her physicals, her neurological tests, even a signed letter from her primary doctor confirming her cognitive health. Clara organized it all into a binder the size of a small dog and labeled it Exhibit Fortress. Next, she dug into Vanessa's timeline. When she was told about the will, how long she waited to contest it, her financial records, Turned out Vanessa had been having some difficulties. She'd maxed out 2 credit cards, missed her student loan payments twice, and had withdrawn from her residency last fall without telling anyone. The golden girl was slipping, and now she needed a lifeline. Meanwhile, I started building something else, not legal, but personal. I began documenting everything. I pulled every family photo I had that showed the difference in how we were treated. Birthday parties where Vanessa had cakes the size of planets while mine had a single candle. Christmas trees buried in gifts with Vanessa tags while mine had 2, maybe 3. I found emails from my mom dismissing me, texts from Vanessa mocking my career. All dated, all archived. But the real prep? That started when I made a decision. If I was going to fight this, I wasn't just going to protect myself. I was going to expose everything. Not out of spite. Out of clarity. Out of truth. Because if Vanessa was willing to burn down Grandma's legacy just to get her hands on a house and some stocks, the least I could do was make sure people knew what kind of person she really was. I called Grandma again, asked her if she was okay with me documenting the family history, our side of it. She said, do it. Tell the truth. I'm tired of people pretending. So I got to work. I started writing, recording, piecing it all together like a puzzle. My childhood, the favoritism, the erasure, the way every success of mine was treated like a fluke, while every minor achievement of Vanessa's was paraded around like the second coming of Einstein. I talked to old teachers who remembered how Mom used to send thank you baskets when Vanessa got an A, and how I once brought home a science trophy and was told, "That's nice, but try to be more like your sister." I tracked down my high school guidance counselor, who remembered how my college recommendation letter almost didn't get sent because my mom insisted Vanessa needed priority bandwidth on the printer. One by one, I stitched together a quilt of quiet injustices. I didn't know exactly what I'd use it for yet, but it felt right, like sharpening blades and waiting for the right wind. Then Clara called. Vanessa's team is requesting a mediation. I paused. Already. They're nervous, she said. They're trying to find a compromise before this becomes something bigger. I knew what that meant. They wanted hush money. They'd come with big words and fake concern. Let's avoid hurting the family, they'd say. Maybe you keep the house, she gets the accounts. You both walk away. Clara was quiet for a second. You don't have to agree. We can go to court. But mediation is a good place to show strength. I said, book it. We chose a neutral space, a firm in Midtown that specialized in family mediations. Glass walls, soft lighting, no clocks. The kind of place designed to feel safe while tearing people apart. Vanessa walked in wearing all white. Symbolic, I guess. She looked tired, hollow in the eyes. But when she saw me, she smirked, like this was just another performance. I didn't speak for the first hour. Her lawyer laid out her concerns in polite tones. They implied Grandma had been confused, that I had isolated her, that I had taken advantage of her fondness for me. Clara let them finish. Then she opened the binder and began calmly, ruthlessly, flipping through the exhibits. Medical forms, emails, testimonies, voicemails from Grandma that said things like, I know they won't understand, but I want to do this for Carter. He's earned it. Vanessa didn't flinch. Not once. She waited until it was her turn to speak. And that's when she made her final move. I'm just saying, she said, her voice syrupy. It's interesting that Carter became close to Grandma right after she sold those old paintings. The ones we didn't know were valuable. Clara raised an eyebrow. Are you suggesting financial misconduct? Vanessa shrugged. I don't know. I just think it's interesting. That was her new strategy, not just to paint me as manipulative, but as dangerous. And in that moment, I knew. This wasn't about the inheritance. It never was. It was about control. She couldn't bear the thought that I had something she didn't. Not money, not property, but dignity. Legacy. The one thing she'd chased her entire life and never earned. That night, I went home and opened my laptop. I took all the stories, the emails, the evidence, the recordings, and I started building a story, not just for the court, but for the world. I called it, The Other Son, What Happens When the Quiet One Speaks. I didn't post it. Not yet. I was still waiting for the final piece. Because I'd found something else. Something in Grandma's storage unit that she had forgotten about. Something from years ago. And when I opened the box and saw what it was, everything changed. Everything. The box was labeled 1978 to 2004. Personal. Just a simple piece of masking tape and Grandma's faded handwriting in blue marker. It had been sitting untouched in a storage unit she rented back when she sold her old house. I never would have found it if I hadn't offered to help her clear the space out. I thought it'd be old sweaters, family photos, maybe some dusty knickknacks. But inside that box was the final nail in Vanessa's perfectly polished coffin. There were 2 journals. Thick, leather-bound, worn from years of flipping pages. At first, I hesitated. It felt invasive. But Grandma was beside me, sitting in a folding chair with a blanket over her knees. She nodded and said, "Go on. I saved them for a reason." So I opened them. What I found wasn't just family history. It was a record, a quiet witness to everything I'd been gaslit into forgetting. Entries spanning decades. Descriptions of birthdays, holidays, report cards. My name came up often. How I'd always tried to help in the kitchen. How I'd made Grandma laugh when I was 5 by pretending to be a robot. How my mom never attended a single one of my science fairs. How Vanessa once took a scholarship I was supposed to apply for and threw the application away so I wouldn't embarrass her. There were copies of letters Grandma had sent to my parents, begging them to treat me with more care. Copies of their replies, cold, dismissive, always circling back to "Vanessa needs our attention right now." One entry stopped me cold. May 2nd, 2006. Carter asked me today why his parents don't come to his chess tournaments. He was so quiet when he said it. He looked down the whole time. I wanted to cry. I told him they were busy. But the truth is, Janice told me Carter's not really a performer. That he's not built for competition. I think about that night a lot. How a child can already understand what it means to be unwanted. I put the journal down. My chest felt heavy, not with sadness, but something closer to confirmation. The kind of grief that comes not from surprise, but from recognition. Like finally finding the piece that proves your puzzle wasn't broken. It was just missing something. This was it. This was what I needed. The next week, I called Clara. "I want to go to court," I said. "No settlement. No mediation. I want everything on the record." Clara paused. "You sure?" "She started this," I said. "Let me finish it." We filed for trial. And while the court prepared its wheels, I prepared my own. The documentary piece I had started, The Other Son, wasn't just a vanity project anymore. I turned it into a full narrative. Not just about me, but about children who are sidelined, gaslit, erased in favor of a more promising sibling. The overlooked, the underestimated. I partnered with Tara's Media Group, and we built out a short web doc, just 22 minutes. Personal stories, expert interviews, footage from my childhood, screenshots, and yes, select pages from Grandma's journals. We changed names where necessary, but anyone in my family watching would know exactly what they were seeing. I didn't release it yet. That would come later, at the perfect time. Trial day, Vanessa arrived with a team of 3 lawyers. Expensive suits, briefcases, lipstick that looked like it had been airbrushed on. I arrived with Clara and Grandma. The judge was a no-nonsense type. Gray hair, small glasses, the kind of woman who'd seen through every trick in the book. From the jump, Clara controlled the room. Calm, focused. She brought up the medical documentation, the timestamps, the signed letters, the video testimony we had recorded with Grandma months earlier. The one where she clearly stated, in her own words, "I'm not being pressured. I know what I'm doing. Carter has always been there for me. This is my choice." Then Vanessa's team started to poke holes. They brought up my sudden interest in the family. They tried to suggest I had always been withdrawn, calculating, emotionally distant. Vanessa testified. She cried, told the court she loved Grandma, that she was only fighting for what's fair, that she didn't want to do this, but she had to because she was afraid Grandma had been misled. Then Clara stood up and asked one question. "Miss Taylor, do you recall ever taking steps to limit Carter's academic opportunities?" Vanessa blinked. "Excuse me, did you ever interfere with scholarships, applications, college opportunities?" Vanessa's lawyer stood up. "Objection." The judge held up a hand. "Answer the question." Vanessa shifted in her seat. "No, of course not." Clara nodded. "Then perhaps you can explain this?" She walked over, set a plastic sleeve on the evidence table. Inside, a crumpled scholarship form. My name at the top. Vanessa's handwriting in the margins. "He's not even going to get in. Just don't give him hope." Vanessa froze. Her lawyer looked like they wanted to meld into their seat. Clara wasn't done. She brought out the journals. Not all of them. just the relevant entries. The ones that showed a consistent, years-long pattern of emotional neglect, manipulation, and silencing. She read them slowly, letting the silence after each word hang heavy in the air. And then, finally, the closing argument. Clara stood, hands folded, and said, "This is not about inheritance. This is about acknowledgement. About a family that built its world around one child and discarded the other. And now, that child, the quiet one, is simply receiving what his grandmother believes he deserves. Not because he asked, but because he earned it." The verdict? In my favor. Completely. The court upheld Grandma's will as valid and legally unchallengeable. Vanessa was ordered to pay partial court fees for filing a frivolous contestation. She left the courtroom without a word. But I wasn't done. That night, I released the documentary. It didn't go viral overnight. It went viral in hours. Tens of thousands of views. Then hundreds. Then national interviews. People reached out from everywhere, adult children, therapists, journalists, thanking me for putting something so invisible into words. Some even recognized my story as theirs. I received thousands of messages. Some long, some just 2 words. Thank you. The fallout for Vanessa? Her residency offer, one she'd recently reapplied for, was quietly withdrawn. Her public social media went dark. Family friends distanced themselves. A few called me privately to say, "We had no idea." I didn't respond to most of them, because it wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about clarity. It was about finally saying, "This happened. I was here. I mattered." Mom called, eventually. Left a voicemail. "I don't know why you did all this, Carter, but I hope you're proud of yourself." I didn't call back. Grandma and I spent her next birthday together on my balcony, watching the city lights dance against the skyline. She looked at me and said, "Took long enough, huh?" "Yeah," I said, smiling. "But I got here." And as the sun began to rise over the city we both loved, I finally let the past rest. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to prove anything. I had nothing left to prove. The quiet one never stays quiet forever. Sometimes, he just waits until everyone's listening. I never thought I'd be the type of person to cut contact with my own parents. I mean, no matter how much you disagree with them, they're still your family, right? That's what I used to believe. But sometimes, family can be the people who hurt you the most. And in my case, my parents didn't just hurt me. They took my generosity, my kindness, and my success and twisted it into something ugly. My name is Daniel, and I'm 28 years old. I grew up in a family where respect was conditional. My parents, especially my dad, always made it clear that love had to be earned. As a kid, that meant getting straight A's, excelling in sports, and doing whatever chores they demanded without question. If I slipped up, even slightly, they reminded me that I was lucky to have a roof over my head. Unlike most parents who might be proud of a hardworking child, mine saw me as an investment. They bragged to their friends about my achievements, but never to my face. Praise was reserved for how I could make them look better. If I won a school competition, they took credit. If I got a scholarship, they told everyone it was because they pushed me so hard. It wasn't that I wanted to be babied with affection, but hearing, "We're proud of you," just once would have meant everything. My younger sister, Rachel, had a completely different experience. She was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. While I had to earn every bit of approval, she was showered with it just for existing. My parents spoiled her, covered for her mistakes, and bent over backward to make sure she was comfortable. If she wanted something, they found a way to get it, even if it meant using me. By the time I was in high school, I had already accepted that I was the family's workhorse. They didn't ask me if I wanted to take on extra responsibilities. They expected it. I got my first job at 16, hoping to save up for a car. But when my mom found out I was making money, she suddenly had emergencies that required me to hand over my paycheck. "You live here for free," she'd say. "It's only fair that you contribute." Of course, Rachel never had to contribute a dime. I worked hard, not just because I had to, but because I wanted to escape. I graduated at the top of my class, got into a great college on a full scholarship, and did everything I could to build a life for myself. Even then, my parents found ways to guilt-trip me. When I moved out, they acted like I was abandoning them. If I didn't visit enough, they'd remind me of everything they sacrificed for me. But the truth was, they had never sacrificed anything for me. If anything, I was the one making sacrifices for them. After years of grinding, I finally reached a point where I was financially secure. I landed a high-paying job, invested wisely, and, for the first time, had real stability. And despite everything, A part of me still wanted my parents to be proud. I thought that maybe if I showed them that I had made it, they'd finally treat me differently. So, like a fool, I decided to give back. I started small, sending money here and there when they needed it. But no matter how much I helped, it was never enough. My mom would call me, sighing dramatically about how tight things were, even though they lived comfortably. My dad would drop hints about how real men take care of their families financially. And Rachel, well, she had no shame outright asking me to cover her bills. Then, the big one came. My parents had been complaining about their mortgage for years. They had refinanced so many times that their monthly payments were ridiculous. I knew they would never get out from under it, so I made a decision. I paid off their house. Every last penny. I thought this would finally be the moment. The one where they looked at me and said, "Thank you, Daniel. We appreciate you." But that moment never came. Instead, my dad barely reacted, as if he had expected it all along. My mom just muttered something about how it was about time someone in the family did something useful. Still, I wasn't ready to give up hope. Maybe they just didn't know how to express gratitude. Maybe it would take time for it to sink in. So, I kept going. I sent them on their dream vacation, an all-expenses-paid trip to Europe. My mom had always talked about wanting to see Paris, and my dad loved history, so I thought this would be the perfect gift. For once, I wanted to see them happy because of something I did. When they got back, I expected to hear all about it. Instead, the first thing my mom said when she saw me was, "Next time, you should book us first class." That was when I started to realize the truth. My generosity wasn't bringing us closer. It was making them worse. They weren't just ungrateful, they saw me as their personal bank. By the time Thanksgiving rolled around, I was already starting to feel drained. But I told myself I'd get through it. After all, it was just one night. I could handle a few snide remarks, a couple of passive-aggressive comments. It was a small price to pay for keeping the peace. But I had no idea how bad it was going to get. When I walked into my parents' house that evening, everything felt normal at first. The smell of turkey filled the air. I greeted everyone, sat down, and braced myself for the usual family chaos. Then, as we started eating, the conversation shifted. My dad, with that familiar smirk on his face, leaned back in his chair and said, "So, Daniel, how does it feel throwing money around, thinking that'll earn you respect?" I froze. The room went silent for a split second before my mom chuckled under her breath. Rachel didn't even look up from her phone. I forced a laugh, trying to play it off. "What do you mean?" My dad took another sip of his drink. "I mean, you act like paying off a house and buying vacations makes you important. But at the end of the day, respect isn't bought. And honestly, you haven't earned any." That was the moment everything inside me snapped. I had spent years bending over backward for these people, giving them everything they asked for and more. And this was their response? Not just ingratitude, but outright mockery? I clenched my jaw, feeling my heart pound in my chest. The worst part wasn't even the words themselves, it was the way he said them. So casual, so dismissive, like he was scolding a child for trying too hard. I set my fork down slowly. "Huh," I said, keeping my voice steady. "That's funny." My dad raised an eyebrow. "What's funny?" I met his gaze and gave him the smallest smile. "You'll see." And with that, I made a decision that would change everything. But I didn't say another word. Not yet. I just kept eating, pretending nothing had happened, all while planning exactly what I was going to do next. Little did they know, their entire world was about to shift. And this time, I wasn't going to be the one cleaning up the mess. I sat through the rest of Thanksgiving dinner in complete silence. My dad kept talking, my mom chimed in with the occasional smug remark, and Rachel stayed glued to her phone as if nothing had happened. But in my head, I was already miles ahead of them. I had spent my entire life playing their game, working hard, giving endlessly, hoping that one day they'd see me as more than just their personal ATM. But tonight, I finally saw things for what they were. They weren't going to change. They never would. So, I was done. I finished my plate, pushed my chair back, and stood up. "Well," I said, forcing a smile, "this was fun. I should get going." Rachel barely looked up. My mom didn't even react. But my dad? He just smirked like he'd won. Like he thought I was running away, licking my wounds. I didn't say anything else. No dramatic speech. No argument. I just grabbed my coat, walked out the door, and left them to their smug little world. And that's when I put my plan into motion. The first thing I did when I got home was log into my bank account. I pulled up every recurring payment I had set up for them, their utilities, their internet. Even that ridiculous streaming service my mom insisted she couldn't live without. I canceled everything. Then, I went deeper. Their property taxes? No longer covered. The insurance on the house? Gone. The maintenance fund I had set up for any repairs? Empty. For years, I had handled every financial detail for them, making sure they never had to lift a finger. Now, they were about to find out exactly what life was like without me. But I wasn't done. I opened up my messages and scrolled to Rachel. I had never told her outright, but I had been paying off her credit card debt for years. Every month, I quietly covered her overdrafts, making sure she never felt the consequences of her spending habits. I pulled up her bank's website and removed my name from the payments. And finally, the last step. I had co-signed my parents' car loan 2 years ago, thinking I was doing something nice for them. It was in my name, but the payments were coming from their account, an account I had been filling without them even knowing. I called the bank and had the car repossessed. It took less than an hour to undo everything. And then, I waited. The first missed call came at 6:45 a.m. The next one at 6:47. By the time I checked my phone, there were 127 missed calls. I didn't even have to listen to the voicemails to know what they were about. I could picture it perfectly. My dad waking up, grabbing his coffee, and heading out the door, only to find his car gone. My mom trying to turn on the TV, only to realize their internet was cut off. Rachel swiping her card at some overpriced boutique, only to have it declined for the first time in her life. I could see the panic setting in, and I smiled. Then my phone rang again. I let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again, and again. Finally, I answered. I didn't say anything, just waited. My mom's voice came screeching through the speaker. What did you do? I leaned back against my pillows, completely calm. Good morning, Mom. Don't you good morning me. The car is gone. Our bills aren't getting paid. The power company just sent a warning that if we don't pay by the end of the day, they'll shut everything off. What is going on? I pretended to think. That's weird. Weird? Weird, she shrieked. You need to fix this now. I sighed dramatically. See, here's the thing, Mom. I thought about what Dad said last night. About how throwing money around doesn't earn respect. And you know what? He's right. So I decided to stop throwing money around. Silence. Then, my dad's voice came in furious. Don't play games with us, Daniel. Fix this. I laughed. I actually laughed. No, what do you mean? No. I shrugged. I mean no. I'm done. If you think I'm such a fool for helping, then I won't help. You wanted to teach me a lesson, right? Consider it learned. You ungrateful little, I hung up. And then, I turned my phone off. I didn't check my messages for the rest of the day. I didn't need to. I already knew what they'd say, more screaming, more guilt-tripping, maybe even a few fake apologies. But I wasn't falling for it this time. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one scrambling to make things right. I was the one watching them fall apart. And honestly, it felt amazing. I didn't turn my phone back on until the next morning. The second I did, the notifications flooded in missed calls, voicemails, texts. My mom had sent paragraph after paragraph, alternating between raging insults and desperate pleas. My dad's messages were short and furious, full of demands. Rachel, of course, had only sent one message. What is wrong with you, Daniel? I scrolled through them, taking my time. The desperation was setting in faster than I expected. Then, as if on cue, my phone started ringing again. Mom. I let it ring. Then it rang again. And again. Finally, I sighed and answered. Daniel, she started, her voice strained, trying to sound calm but already cracking. You need to fix this. Now. Good morning, Mom, I said, leaning back in my chair. How's everything going? Don't play dumb. Her voice sharpened. The internet is off. The power company says they're shutting us down in 24 hours. Your father had to take the bus to work. Daniel. The bus. Do you understand how humiliating that was for him? I almost laughed. Oh no. How awful. You mean, like regular people? This isn't funny. She snapped. You can't just stop paying for everything and leave us in this mess. What are we supposed to do? I leaned forward. I don't know, Mom. Maybe get jobs? Maybe, I don't know, take responsibility for your own lives. You. She cut herself off, exhaling sharply. When she spoke again, her voice was lower. Daniel, we are your family. You don't just turn your back on family. Interesting, I said. Because last night, I could have sworn I was just some fool who thinks he's important because he throws money around. Right? Isn't that what Dad said? She hesitated. Then, in a tone so fake it made my skin crawl, she said, "Sweetheart, you know your father didn't mean that." "Oh, he didn't?" I asked, tilting my head. "Then why didn't he apologize?" Silence. I waited. Nothing. I smiled. "That's what I thought. Have a great day, Mom." I hung up. The calls didn't stop. Neither did the texts. Over the next few days, the messages became more erratic. My mom sending long-winded guilt trips about how I was abandoning them, my dad cycling between threats and silence, and Rachel alternating between pretending she didn't care and demanding I fix her credit card. But I held firm. Then, exactly 1 week later, they showed up at my door. I had barely opened it when my dad pushed inside, my mom right behind him. Rachel lagged behind, arms crossed, looking irritated more than anything. "What is wrong with you?" My dad barked, towering over me. "You think you can just cut us off like this?" I stepped back, folding my arms. "Yeah, I do." "You selfish little," Mom grabbed his arm, stopping him. "Daniel," she said, her voice soft and sickly sweet. "We just need to talk. As a family." "Oh, now we're a family?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "Because last week, I was just a fool throwing money around." She exhaled sharply. "I told you, your father didn't mean that." Then he should have said that himself. Dad's hands clenched into fists, and for a second, I thought he was actually going to throw a punch. Instead, he took a deep breath, nostrils flaring. "Fine," he said through gritted teeth. "Maybe I was too harsh. But that doesn't mean you get to do this. You don't just let your parents struggle." I scoffed. "Struggle? You mean like I did when you kicked me out at 18 and told me to figure it out? Or like I did when I worked 2 jobs while you refused to lift a finger to help me? Or how about when I finally got successful and the only thing you ever did was demand more?" Rachel groaned loudly. "Oh my God, we get it. You struggled. Boo-hoo. Can we just skip to the part where you fix everything?" I turned to her, stunned. "Fix everything?" She rolled her eyes. "Yes, Daniel. Just turn everything back on. Jesus, it's not that hard." I stared at her, then at my parents. None of them looked remorseful. None of them even seemed to realize what they had done. They weren't here to apologize. They weren't here to make things right. They were here because they needed me. Because for the first time in their lives, they actually had to face consequences. And they couldn't stand it. I took a slow, deep breath and looked each of them in the eye. "No," I said simply. My dad's jaw tightened. My mom's face fell. Rachel just scoffed. Dad took a step forward. "Daniel, I am not going to ask you again, and I am not going to say it again," I interrupted. "No, I'm done. If you want money, go earn it. If you want the house paid for, do it yourself. I'm done being your personal bank." My mom's face twisted. "We raised you. You owe us." I laughed coldly. "You raised me? You kicked me out at 18. You refused to help me when I was struggling. You let me break my back for years while you sat around doing nothing." I took a step closer, lowering my voice. "I don't owe you a single thing." For the first time, none of them had anything to say. I looked at them one last time, then walked to the door and opened it wide. "Get out." Dad's fists clenched. His nostrils flared. But for once, he said nothing. He just stormed past me, shoving the door as he left. Rachel groaned, flipping her hair back. "You're such a drama queen," she muttered before following. Mom was the last to leave. She hesitated, her mouth opening like she wanted to say something. But when I didn't respond, she just exhaled and walked out. I shut the door behind them, locked it, and for the first time in my life, I felt free. For a while, I thought they had finally given up. No more calls. No more texts. No more guilt tripping. The silence was strange at first, but after years of being emotionally blackmailed and financially drained, I started to enjoy it. My phone wasn't blowing up with demands. I wasn't being treated like a human ATM. I was finally free. Or so I thought. 3 weeks after Thanksgiving, I got a call from my aunt, my mom's older sister, Linda. Now, Linda and I were never particularly close. She had always been the family mediator, the one who tried to smooth things over whenever my parents caused chaos. She wasn't as outright toxic as them, but she had a bad habit of brushing off their behavior, constantly excusing them with, "That's just how they are." So when she called, I knew something was up. The second I picked up, she sighed dramatically. "Daniel, you need to fix this." I already knew where this was going. "Fix what?" I said, keeping my voice flat. "Your mother is beside herself. Your father has been completely stressed out. They don't know how they're going to survive. Do you really think it's okay to treat your parents like this? I felt my patience snap. Aunt Linda, they used me. For years. And when I finally put up a boundary, they humiliated me in front of the whole family. Now they expect me to keep funding their lives like nothing happened. They're your parents, she said, as if that was supposed to mean something. Family is family. I let out a bitter laugh. Funny. They didn't seem to care about family when they threw me out at 18. Where was this energy when I was struggling to survive on my own? Silence. She wasn't expecting that. Finally, she sighed again. Daniel, look, I get it. Your parents aren't perfect. But you're doing well now. You have the ability to help them. They're struggling, and you're just watching. Yes, I said, completely unbothered. Yes, I am. Her voice turned sharp. You're being cruel. No, I'm finally treating them the way they treated me. Another pause. Then her tone shifted into something more condescending. Fine. You don't have to give them money. But at least talk to them. Be the bigger person. That made me laugh. Why is it always me who has to be the bigger person? Why does everyone expect me to forgive and forget while they keep taking and taking? She huffed. You're being unreasonable. You're going to regret this one day. No, I won't. I hung up. That was the first sign they weren't done with me yet. The second sign came 2 days later. I woke up to 47 missed calls and a flood of texts from my parents, Rachel, and a few other relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. The messages ranged from fake concern to outright rage. Mom texted, Daniel, please, we need to talk. I don't understand why you're doing this to us. Dad texted, you've made your point. Now be a man and take responsibility for your family. Rachel texted, wow, so you're really going to let Mom and Dad suffer just to prove a point? You're disgusting. Random cousin I haven't spoken to since childhood texted, dude, I don't know what's going on, but you need to make this right. Family is everything. And then there was the one that made me angry. Mom texted, we did everything for you. We gave you life. We raised you. And this is how you repay us? Abandoning us in our time of need? We're about to lose everything, and it's your fault. I hope you can live with that. I stared at my phone, my hands shaking with rage. My fault? My fault? They had no savings, no backup plan, no sense of responsibility, and somehow it was my job to fix it? After everything? After the years of guilt tripping, the entitlement, the humiliation? No, I wasn't falling for it. I didn't respond. The calls kept coming. The messages got nastier. Then, after a week of silence, my doorbell rang. I checked the camera. It was my parents. I didn't answer. They rang again, and again, and again. Then came the pounding. Daniel, open the door. My dad's voice furious. I sat on my couch, staring at the door, heart racing. My mom's voice followed, all fake sweetness. Honey, please. We just want to talk. I stayed silent. More pounding. You can't ignore us forever. Yes, I can, I muttered under my breath. They stayed outside for nearly an hour before finally leaving. That night, my mom sent a final text. You will regret this. One day, you'll need us, and we won't be there. I hope you're happy. I blocked their numbers. That was 3 months ago. Since then, I've heard bits and pieces from other family members. My parents had to sell their house. My dad was forced to go back to work. My mom tried to start some online business, but it failed. Rachel? She's still bitter. Still complaining to anyone who will listen about what a selfish, ungrateful brother I am. None of it is my problem anymore. And you know what? I don't feel guilty. Not one bit. Because for the first time in my life, I'm free. So, Reddit, what do you think? Was I too harsh? Or was this the only way to finally be free? My name's Noah, I'm 32, and if I'm being honest, I never expected to be the black sheep of the family. I'm the middle child, the one who never made waves growing up, who got decent grades, stayed out of trouble, and quietly helped where I could. I never needed much. I figured if I just kept my head down and supported everyone, they'd have my back too when it mattered. Turns out, I was dead wrong. You don't realize just how far you've been pushed aside until you're handed a plastic chair and told to be useful. Like you're the help, not family. The story really starts a few weeks before my niece's birthday party. I'd offered, no, insisted, on paying for the cake. It was something I wanted to do because despite everything, I adore my niece Emma. She's 8 now, smart as a whip, and still innocent enough to run into my arms when she sees me, like nothing in the world has changed. She doesn't notice the way her mom, my sister, rolls her eyes when I show up, or how my mom tightens her smile like I'm some obligation they have to tolerate. Emma just sees Uncle Noah, and that's enough for me. So I wanted to make her birthday special. I called around, found a bakery that could do this elaborate garden-themed cake with fairies and flowers, and her name in cursive frosting. It wasn't cheap, but I didn't care. I didn't tell anyone how much it cost. I didn't even mention that I paid for express delivery to make sure it arrived fresh and perfect the morning of the party. I just told my sister, Rachel, "Cake's handled." She didn't say thank you, just nodded like it was the least I could do. I should have known that was a sign. When the day of the party came, I showed up a little early to help set up. I brought balloons, a stack of party hats I'd bought on a whim, and even these little DIY fairy wands I'd spent 2 nights hot gluing after work. Rachel barely looked up when I walked in. "You can just put those by the snack table," she said, gesturing vaguely. The backyard was already full of folding chairs and mismatched tables. It wasn't anything fancy, but it was enough for Emma and her friends to run around and scream and make memories. I smiled when I saw her. She was wearing this little flower crown and a sparkly purple dress. She ran up and hugged me, and for a moment, I forgot about everything else. That moment didn't last long. "Hey," Rachel said as more guests started trickling in. "Can you move your car? You parked where Mom and Dad are going to be sitting." I blinked. "They need parking spaces now." "Noah," she sighed, like I was being difficult. "Just move it, okay?" So I did. I parked 2 blocks away, under a tree, then jogged back because I didn't want to miss Emma opening her first gift. When I got back, Rachel handed me a plastic white chair, one of those cheap, creaky ones you get at garage sales. "You can sit over there," she said, pointing to the corner by the hedge. I looked over and realized the main table, the one with the cake centerpiece, the nice chairs, and the colorful tablecloth, was full of family. My parents, my brother Jake, his wife, even our cousin Lisa, who hadn't spoken to me in over a year. There was a little girl sitting between Jake and Lisa, swinging her legs and sipping juice. Emma's friends sat around a second, slightly smaller table, but at least it was covered and had shade. My corner had neither. Just a view of the neighbor's fence and the trash bins lined up neatly like little gray soldiers. "Really?" I asked. Rachel didn't even look up. "Don't make a scene like last time." "What scene?" I said, quieter now. "You know what I mean," she muttered. Then she turned to someone else and started laughing at a joke that had nothing to do with me. I stood there holding the chair like a fool until my mom walked past, sunglasses perched on her head, a glass of white wine in her hand. "Don't start, Noah," she said lightly. "It's Emma's day." I didn't reply. I just nodded and walked over to my assigned corner. I didn't sit. A few minutes later, Jake, my older brother, the golden child, sauntered up with a half-empty bowl of chips. "Hey, you mind refilling this?" he asked, already turning back toward the table. "They're by the fridge." I stared at him for a second. "Do I look like a waiter?" He laughed. "Come on, don't be sensitive." I didn't argue. I didn't throw the chair or yell or demand to be treated better. I just turned and walked back toward the house, passing by kids running through a sprinkler, parents chatting by the barbecue, and Rachel's voice floating above it all, loud, cheerful, commanding. The kitchen was empty. The cake sat in the center of the counter, still in its protective plastic shell, a masterpiece of pink and green and delicate sugar flowers. And that's when I decided. I walked right back outside with the cake in my hands, cradling it gently like something sacred. People turned to look. Conversations paused. Rachel frowned when she saw me coming. "Noah," she said sharply, "what are you?" But I didn't answer. I walked straight past the tables, past the confused glances and hushed whispers, past my mother's stunned face and Jake's open mouth. I didn't run. I didn't yell. I didn't even look back. I just kept walking. The gate creaked behind me as I stepped out onto the sidewalk, the sun glaring down like a spotlight. And still, I didn't say a word. Not yet. Because they hadn't seen the note I left taped to the bottom of the cake box. And they definitely hadn't seen what I had planned next. I didn't even get a block away before my phone started buzzing. First it was Rachel, then Mom, then Jake. I let every call go to voicemail. Not out of spite. Okay, maybe a little, but because I needed silence. I needed a moment to think. I walked slowly, the cake still in my hands, careful with every step. There was something strangely peaceful about it. The world around me had gone completely still, like it knew this moment needed space to breathe. I ducked into a quiet park not far from Rachel's house, sat down on a shaded bench, and finally let the cake rest in my lap. I looked at it. This perfect, handcrafted thing I had ordered weeks ago, with Emma's name in curly frosting letters. It wasn't her fault her mom was like this. And part of me ached thinking she'd be disappointed when they told her the cake was gone. But I also knew Rachel would twist the story. She always did. Uncle Noah had a meltdown, she'd say. He stormed out. Don't worry, sweetie. Mommy will get you another cake. Except this time, I had proof. Because taped under the box, where Rachel would find it eventually, probably after storming into the kitchen and cursing my name, was a handwritten note. Not rude. Not dramatic. Just simple. It said, "This cake was a gift. Paid for in full by the person you won't give a seat at the table. Maybe next year, don't treat him like he doesn't exist." The note wasn't for Emma. It was for Rachel. For Mom. For Jake. For anyone in that backyard who thought it was perfectly acceptable to make me feel invisible. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from Mom. "Noah, come back. Please don't ruin Emma's day." I stared at it for a while, feeling the heat rise in my chest. Ruin her day? What about the way they ruined mine? Over and over, quietly, gradually, until I started to believe I deserved it. The thing is, it wasn't just this one party. It was years of being excluded in subtle ways. Being asked to help, but never being thanked. Being invited at the last minute or not at all. Family photos where I was mysteriously absent. Group chats where my messages got left on read. Holidays where I ended up in the kitchen, cleaning dishes while everyone else laughed in the living room. And every time I said something, every single time, I was told not to make a scene, not to be so dramatic, to grow up. I was tired of growing up for people who never grew out of being cruel. A breeze rustled through the trees, and I closed my eyes for a moment, feeling oddly free. Like I had just dropped something heavy I didn't even know I was carrying. Then came the message that snapped me out of it. From Rachel. "Where is the cake?" No please. No apology. No self-awareness. Just anger, entitlement, and that same tone she's used since we were kids, the one that assumed I owed her something just for existing. I didn't respond. Instead, I took a photo of the cake, still untouched, still beautiful, and sent it back to her. No caption. A minute later, her call came in. I answered this time. "Noah," she snapped, "what is wrong with you? You embarrassed everyone. Do you even care that Emma's crying right now?" I kept my voice calm. "Tell Emma I'm sorry. I'll make it up to her. You better bring that cake back right now." "No," I said simply. She sputtered for a second. "What do you mean, no?" "I mean, no," I said again, quieter this time. "You don't get to treat me like I'm disposable and then demand I fix it when your plan falls apart." "I didn't say you were disposable," she huffed. We didn't have room at the table, okay? It's not that deep." "Rachel," I said, "you had room for Lisa, who hasn't spoken to this family in years. You had room for your coworker's husband, who doesn't even know Emma's middle name. But me? I get a chair by the trash." She went quiet. "You and Mom and Jake. You've been pushing me to the edges for years." And I took it. I told myself it didn't matter. That maybe if I kept showing up, you'd see me. "Noah," she started. "But I think I finally get it," I said. "You don't see me because you don't want to. You want the version of me that pays for things quietly and stays out of the way. The one who doesn't ask for a seat. The one who doesn't make a scene. Well, today was my scene. And I'm not sorry." There was a long pause on the other end. Then, bitter and sharp, "You're unbelievable." "No," I said. "I'm just done." I hung up before she could say anything else. I sat there in that park for a while, unsure of what to do next. A part of me still felt guilty, not for Rachel or the others, but for Emma. She didn't deserve to be caught in the middle. I didn't want her to think I didn't care. So I pulled out my phone, found a contact named Grace, Emma's babysitter, who I trusted more than anyone in that house, and typed out a message. "Hey, I left Emma's cake with the cafe on Main Street. It's under her name. Please pick it up and bring it to her tonight. I'll send you money for the taxi." Grace replied almost instantly. "Absolutely. Is everything okay?" "It will be." I smiled to myself, stood up, and took one last look at the cake before gently placing it back in the delivery box. Then I walked to the corner, flagged down a rideshare, and headed straight to the cafe. I explained everything to the staff, asked them to hold it under Emma's name, and left a generous tip for their trouble. As I walked back out into the sunlight, my phone stayed quiet for the first time all day. No calls, no texts, just the soft feeling of relief creeping up my spine. What I didn't know yet, what none of them knew, was that this moment was only the beginning, because the party wasn't the only thing I had paid for. And next week, they were going to find out just how much I'd really been carrying. But not on their terms. Not anymore. The following morning, my inbox was flooded. Emails, calendar invites, payment confirmations, all from things I had quietly signed up for, reserved, or paid deposits on, and not just the cake. I had kept receipts. That was the thing no one realized about me. While they were out making noise and commanding attention, I kept records. Not because I was planning revenge back then, but because when you're the person no one thanks, you start needing proof that you mattered at all. The bounce house, booked under my name. The pink and lavender folding tables and chairs that Rachel bragged about getting a great deal on. I'd paid the rental company myself 2 weeks ago when she mentioned she was over budget. The themed party favors that every kid got in their little gift bags. I'd stayed up until 2 a.m. on Tuesday printing Emma's name on each one with glittery stickers. And the photographer? That was me too. The thing is, I hadn't planned to use any of this as leverage. At the time, I just wanted to make the day special. But standing alone in that park yesterday, I realized how often I gave and gave, just for them to pretend I wasn't even there. That kind of invisible labor piles up, and eventually, it turns into something sharp. I opened my email and forwarded all the receipts to my personal folder, along with the remaining invoices. There was still one final payment due for the photographer. I hadn't paid it yet. It was scheduled to go through that morning, and now I canceled it. An hour later, my phone rang. It was the photographer. "Hey, Noah, I just got a message from your sister. She's saying I'm not being paid for yesterday." "Correct," I said calmly. "That was never her expense." There was a short pause. "So, are you not paying either?" "I will," I said, "but not until I've received all the raw photos. And just to be clear, I'd like you to skip any family group photos they asked you to take. Just send me the candids of the kids. Especially Emma." "Understood," she said, and to my surprise, added quietly, "You handled yesterday with a lot more class than most people would have." That stuck with me. I went quiet the rest of that Sunday. Stayed offline. No social media, no texts, just music playing low in the background as I cooked a quiet dinner for myself. Around 8 p.m., Grace texted again. She'd delivered the cake. Apparently, Emma's face had lit up when she saw it, like the sun had come back out. "She asked where you were," Grace wrote. "I told her you had to leave early, but that you made sure the cake got to her." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Thanks," I replied. "Tell her gift's coming soon." That part was true. I'd bought Emma a beginner's digital drawing tablet last month. She'd gotten really into art, and I wanted to encourage that. I just hadn't wrapped it yet. But now I had something else in mind. Monday rolled around, and I got a call from my mom. "Noah," she said, her voice soft, too soft. "Can we talk?" I leaned back in my chair. "We're talking. Look, I don't know what that was on Saturday, but you really upset Rachel. The whole party was thrown off." "Oh, I know," I said. "It's almost like one person pulled the foundation out from under it." "Noah," she said sharply, "that's not fair." I didn't raise my voice. "You're right. What's not fair is being excluded from my own niece's party while footing half the bill." There was silence. Then, "You paid for the—" "Yeah," I said. "All of it, Mom. The cake, the tables, the favors, the photographer. I didn't just show up to eat chips." More silence. Then finally a sigh. "Rachel didn't tell us that." "Of course she didn't. Because if she had, you might have asked why I wasn't at the family table." "Noah," she started again, but her voice was faltering. I cut in, gently but firmly. "I'm tired, Mom. Tired of being treated like I'm only useful when I'm writing a check or lifting something heavy. I'm done pretending it doesn't hurt." "I didn't know you felt that way," she said quietly. "That's because you never asked," I said. "None of you do." After a pause, she said, "Maybe we should have a dinner. Just you, me, and Rachel. Talk it through." I almost laughed. The idea of sitting between them while they pretended to care for an hour, only to dismiss everything I said with, "That's not how we remember it," or, "You're too sensitive." I'd lived that scene too many times. "No," I said. "Not this time. But I'm not looking for another awkward peace talk. I'm just stepping back." And for once, she didn't push. She just sighed again, softer this time. "I hope you'll come around." "Maybe," I said, "but only if you come around first." I hung up. That night, I wrapped Emma's gift, wrote her a card, and tucked in a little drawing I made myself. A sketch of her as a fairy, standing on a cake with wings made of sugar and sparkles. I didn't sign it, Uncle Noah. I just signed it N. The next few days passed without a word from Rachel or Jake. I figured they were still stewing. That was fine by me. I had something else to focus on anyway. Because one final payment hadn't gone through yet. The reservation for the venue they planned to use for my dad's retirement dinner next month. Guess whose card was on file? Guess who paid the deposit? Guess who was listed as the point of contact with the venue manager? I looked at the confirmation email, hovering my finger over the cancel reservation button. And then I paused. Not because I wasn't going to do it, but because I had a better idea. A much better one. And when they saw what I had in store, they were going to wish they'd given me that seat at the table. The venue was a sleek banquet hall on the edge of town, nestled between an upscale golf course and a vineyard. My dad had always said he wanted to celebrate retirement, somewhere classy. None of that backyard barbecue stuff. Rachel had taken it upon herself to plan the whole thing, despite the fact that she hadn't spoken to our dad more than twice a month for years. She acted like this party was her gift to him, a send-off for a man who had worked 40 years in the same logistics company and was finally calling it quits. What she didn't mention to anyone, including Jake, my mom, or even Dad himself, was that the deposit for the venue, a solid $1,500, came from my account. I'd paid it quietly, without fanfare, during one of our rare civil family moments back in March. At the time, I just wanted to help. I didn't even ask to be listed on the invite or included in the planning group chat that Rachel conveniently forgot to add me to. But that was before the birthday party, before the folding chair by the trash, before I realized I was just a silent sponsor to a family that didn't actually want me in the picture. So now, I was taking myself out of it, and I was going to do it in the most memorable way possible. I didn't cancel the reservation. Instead, I modified it. The venue allowed you to make significant changes up to 2 weeks before the event. I read the fine print twice to be sure. I kept the same date, same time, same number of guests, but I swapped out the menu, adjusted the decor, and sent in a fresh playlist and photo slideshow to the AV team. I even requested the host's microphone be available during dessert. And most importantly, I changed the contact email and removed Rachel's number from the file completely. The week of the party, I called Dad and asked him to meet for coffee. Alone. We hadn't had a one-on-one talk in probably a year, and I could tell he was surprised. He showed up in a navy windbreaker, looking tired but happy, the kind of man who had finally put the paperwork down and was just waiting to exhale. "Noah," he said, shaking my hand like I was someone he respected. That alone made me pause. We sat. I bought his coffee. I waited. "You doing okay?" he asked after a few minutes. "I'm getting there," I said. "But there's something I want to talk to you about." Before the party. He furrowed his brow. "What party?" I blinked. "Your retirement party." He frowned deeper. I didn't know there was one. And that's when it clicked. Rachel never told him. She planned this whole massive event, emailed invites, coordinated decorations, even picked a speech from Mom, and didn't bother to let him in on it. She wanted a show, a grand production, something to post online with a caption like "Celebrating Dad, a man who taught us everything." She wasn't planning this for him. She was planning it for herself. I took a long breath. "There is a party," I said. "This weekend. I paid for the venue. You're the guest of honor." Dad just looked at me, stunned. "Why didn't anyone tell me?" "Because they wanted it to be their moment," I said. "Not yours." He didn't say anything for a while, just stirred his coffee. Then, softly, "You changed a lot, Noah." I smiled. "I'm still me. I just stopped accepting scraps." Saturday came. The sun was blazing, but there was a breeze. I showed up early to the venue in a crisp button-down and slacks, feeling calm. Not giddy, not nervous, just ready. The hall looked amazing. I'd worked with the staff to replace the generic gold and white theme Rachel had chosen with something more personal. The walls were decorated with enlarged photos of Dad fishing, grilling in the backyard, playing chess with me when I was 10. No fake accolades, just real moments. His moments. The buffet had been changed too. Instead of the salmon and risotto Rachel picked, we served my dad's favorites: barbecue sliders, mashed potatoes, cornbread, and grilled veggies. Comfort food. The kind of food he always made for us when we were kids. Guests started trickling in around 6. At first confused, especially Rachel and Jake, but no one said anything right away. Not until they noticed the music wasn't Rachel's playlist. It was mine. Classics from the 70s and 80s, the kind of stuff Dad used to play on road trips. Rachel looked around, clearly unsettled. She spotted me by the punch table. "Noah," she hissed, marching over. "What's going on?" I sipped my drink and gave her the calmest smile I could muster. "Just a little surprise." "Why are the decorations different?" she snapped. "Where's the slideshow I sent them? Where's the menu?" "I updated everything with the venue," I said. I figured Dad deserved something real, something he actually likes. Her face went pale. "You had no right." "I had every right," I said. "My name's on the reservation. My card's on file. I paid for this entire thing." "Unbelievable," she muttered, turning to storm off. But she stopped in her tracks when she saw Dad walk in. He looked around, blinking in surprise as people clapped and called his name. He saw the decorations, the photos, the spread of his favorite foods. And then he looked at me. His eyes welled up. Rachel turned to him quickly. "Dad, this wasn't. I helped." But he barely heard her. He walked up to me and pulled me into a hug. A real hug. One that lasted a few seconds longer than it needed to. "Thank you," he whispered. That was it. The rest of the evening felt like something out of another life. People laughed. They shared stories. My dad gave a short, honest speech. No one mentioned spreadsheets or promotions or stock options. They talked about his bad jokes and his Sunday barbecues and how he never missed a school play. And when dessert came out, a custom cake shaped like a fishing boat with "Captain of our Family" written in frosting, the DJ handed me the mic. I stood at the front, looking out over a sea of faces that, for the first time, didn't seem like strangers pretending to be family. And I said, "I just want to say one thing. For years, I thought the best way to earn a seat at the table was to keep quiet, to help from the background. But I've learned something recently. If people can't see your value when you're quiet, then maybe they never deserved your voice to begin with. So tonight, I'm not in the background. I'm not invisible. I'm here, and I'm proud to be." The room clapped. Some even stood. Rachel was frozen at her table, lips tight, arms crossed. Jake just looked down at his drink. Later that night, as people filtered out and the staff started cleaning up, Dad found me again. He looked tired, but happy. "You didn't just throw me a party," he said. "You reminded me what it means to show up for someone." I nodded. "That's all I ever wanted from you." He hesitated. "I know I wasn't always fair. I let a lot slide, especially with Rachel and Jake. I'm sorry for that." I didn't say anything right away. I just looked at him and, after a moment, gave a small nod. It wasn't everything, but it was enough. We stepped outside together. The sky was dark now, stars poking through. The parking lot was nearly empty. Rachel brushed past us on her way to her car. She didn't say goodbye, didn't even look at me. That was okay, because for the first time in my life, I didn't need her to. I had already reclaimed my seat at the table. And if they couldn't handle that, they could eat somewhere else. My name's Jake. I'm 28 now, but the story I'm about to share still makes my stomach twist like I'm a kid again. It's strange how something as simple as a birthday cake can stick with you, carving out a wound that doesn't really heal no matter how many years pass. I grew up in a family where favoritism wasn't whispered about or hidden. It was displayed right out in the open, almost like a family tradition. My younger sister, Lily, was the shining star, the one who could do no wrong. She was smart, yes, but more than that, she was my dad's pride and joy. And me? I was the afterthought, the one who got the smaller slice, literally and figuratively. I've always been the quieter one, not because I didn't have anything to say, but because I learned early on that my words never carried the same weight as Lily's. If she forgot to do chores, I got blamed for not reminding her. If I excelled in something, it was brushed off as luck or coincidence. I remember once in middle school, I won second place in a science fair. I was so proud, standing there with my certificate and a goofy grin. When I brought it home, my dad's response was, "Well, Lily will get first place next year. You'll see." That was the pattern. My accomplishments turned into her stepping stones, while my mistakes turned into family anecdotes to laugh about at the dinner table. So when my birthday rolled around last year, I wasn't expecting much. Honestly, I've learned not to. But I still held on to this little flicker of hope that maybe this time, things would be different. My mom baked the cake. It was chocolate, my favorite, though I knew she only made it because Lily didn't like vanilla. Family came over, a few neighbors, and even one of Lily's friends, someone I barely knew. We all sang. The candles were blown out, and I stood there trying to soak in the moment, telling myself it was fine, that this was enough. Then came the cutting of the cake. I watched as slice after slice was handed out. Lily got one, of course, and her friend, who hadn't even said happy birthday to me, got one next. Then my dad looked at the plate in his hand, at the cake, and muttered, "There might not be enough for everyone." He paused, then added casually, "Jake can skip this time." Just like that. No hesitation. No second thought. The room was full of people, and yet it felt like the air was sucked right out of it. My mom didn't say anything, just looked down at the table. Lily laughed like it was some kind of joke. And me? I stood there, frozen, as a piece of my own birthday cake was handed to someone else. I don't know what burned more, my dad's words or the silence that followed them. Nobody spoke up for me. Not a single person said, "Wait, it's his birthday." It was as if I didn't even exist. I felt my throat tighten, that familiar lump that always shows up when you want to cry but refuse to give them the satisfaction. Instead, I swallowed it down, grabbed my jacket from the chair, and walked straight out the door. I heard someone call me ungrateful as I left, but I didn't turn back. I didn't argue. I just walked, the night air biting at my face, my chest heavy like I was carrying years' worth of moments just like that one. That was the first crack, the moment that forced me to really see how deep the pattern went. And as I walked down that dimly lit street, away from the laughter spilling out of the house, I knew this wasn't just about cake. It was about every single time they'd chosen someone else over me. Every single time I'd been told, directly or indirectly, that I didn't matter. And for the first time, instead of swallowing it, instead of pretending I was fine, a thought settled in the back of my mind. Maybe I was done playing their game. I didn't go back home that night. I walked for a long time, trying to process what had just happened, my phone buzzing in my pocket with messages I refused to look at. I ended up at a diner near the edge of town, sitting in a booth with a cup of coffee that went cold before I touched it. It wasn't about the cake. I kept telling myself that. It was about everything else it represented. That night was just another page in a book I'd been forced to read my whole life. By the time I got back to my apartment, I knew something inside me had shifted. I wasn't going to beg for scraps anymore, literal or metaphorical. The next few weeks were a blur of silence from me and half-hearted attempts from them. My mom called once, not to apologize, but to say, "Your dad didn't mean it that way. You're making too big of a deal out of nothing." Lily sent me a text. "You were so dramatic. It was just cake, Jake." My dad didn't reach out at all. The absence of his voice almost said more than anything else. And then, as if nothing had happened, life continued. But I started noticing things more clearly, like the way my dad's tone softened when he spoke to Lily, how he praised her for the smallest things. She got a part-time job at a clothing store, and suddenly she was responsible and hardworking. Meanwhile, I'd been working 2 jobs through college just to keep myself afloat, and not once had I heard those words directed at me. The favoritism wasn't subtle. Lily had just turned 23, and they'd surprised her with a used car for her birthday. They called it a family investment so she could get around easier. When I asked, calmly, genuinely curious, why I'd never received that kind of support, my dad laughed and said, "You always figured things out on your own, Jake. You didn't need help." As if my independence was some kind of excuse for their neglect. I bit my tongue, but inside I wanted to scream. Maybe I wouldn't have needed to figure everything out alone if you hadn't left me to. Things got worse during family gatherings. I started noticing how they'd use me as the punchline. My uncle once asked how work was going, and before I could answer, my dad cut in with, "Oh, you know Jake, still trying to find his place in the world." Everyone chuckled, including Lily, who added, "Yeah, at least I know what I'm doing with my life." She was working retail and still living at home rent-free, but somehow I was the one who hadn't figured things out. My jaw clenched so hard I thought I might break a tooth, but I just forced a smile. That's what I always did, forced a smile, swallowed the words. The manipulation was quieter but sharper. My mom would call, asking me to come to Sunday dinners. She'd phrase it like I was punishing them by staying away. "Your dad misses you, Jake. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." But when I gave in and showed up, it was always the same routine, me sitting there like an outsider, watching my dad dote on Lily. She'd hog the conversation, and any time I tried to talk about my work or plans, the subject would shift. I'd walk away from the table feeling smaller than when I arrived. It was during one of those dinners that the mask slipped completely. Lily had been talking about wanting to move out soon, though I knew she hadn't saved a dime. My dad leaned back in his chair, looked at me, and said, "Maybe you could help her get started. You're doing okay now, aren't you? Just a little loan, brother to sister." I froze, my fork halfway to my mouth. Lily smiled like she'd already won, like this was just a formality. I asked, "And when did I become her safety net?" My dad's face hardened. "Don't talk back. We're family. Family helps each other." The words hung in the air, thick and heavy, because I knew he didn't mean family. He meant me. I was expected to help, to sacrifice, to give. Lily was expected to receive. That night, as I sat in my car outside their house, gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles went white, I realized the roles we'd been assigned weren't accidental. Lily was the chosen one, the golden child. I was the reliable backup plan. And as much as I hated admitting it, I'd played right into their script for years, staying quiet, showing up when asked, swallowing my pride. But the birthday cake incident had cracked something in me, and this dinner hammered it wide open. I wasn't just dealing with favoritism anymore. I was being groomed to carry their burdens, to clean up their messes, while Lily got handed slice after slice, even when there wasn't enough to go around. And in that moment, sitting alone in the car, I started thinking for the first time not about how to endure it, but how to change it. A few months after that dinner, the real breaking point came. An act so blatant it stripped away any illusions I still had about where I stood in this family. It was a Saturday morning when my mom called. Her tone was syrupy sweet, the kind she used when she wanted something. "Jake," she began, drawing out my name like she always did. "We're having a little family get-together tonight. Nothing big, just close family and a few of Lily's friends. You should come." I almost said no. Every instinct told me to decline, to save myself the humiliation. But something in me still clung to that tiny, pathetic hope that maybe this time would be different. Maybe they'd surprise me. Maybe they'd finally notice I existed beyond being the one they could lean on when it was convenient. So, against my better judgment, I agreed. When I arrived that evening, the house was already buzzing with laughter. I walked in, carrying a bottle of wine I'd picked up as a courtesy, and immediately felt the shift. Conversations quieted for a second, eyes darted to me, then moved away just as quickly. Lily's friends were sprawled across the living room, comfortable as if it were their house, not mine. My dad was in his usual chair, beer in hand, grinning at Lily like she'd hung the moon. I handed the wine to my mom. She smiled faintly and said, "Oh, you didn't have to bring anything." But instead of setting it aside for later, she placed it on the counter, unopened, while opening a bottle someone else had brought. That sting of invisibility settled in again. It wasn't until after dinner that the true betrayal unfolded. My dad cleared his throat, a signal everyone seemed to understand except me. "So," he announced proudly, "we have some exciting news." He looked at Lily, who beamed, and then back at me. "Your sister is moving into a new apartment. We're all so proud of her." There was applause, clapping, cheers from her friends. I sat there stunned, trying to piece it together. Lily? Moving out. She hadn't mentioned anything about it before. Then my dad dropped the bomb. "Of course," he continued, "Jake has agreed to co-sign the lease. He's doing well now, and it's only right that he helps his sister get started." The room erupted in nods and approving murmurs, as if I had already said yes. My jaw literally dropped. "Excuse me." I managed to choke out, my voice cutting through the noise. Lily smirked at me, that smug little curl of her lips I'd seen 1,000 times growing up. "Don't act so shocked, Jake. You know it makes sense. You're responsible. Dad said you'd be happy to help." I felt my heart slam against my chest, heat crawling up my neck. "I never agreed to that," I said firmly. The room went quiet. My dad's smile faltered, replaced by that look, half anger, half disappointment, that he'd perfected over the years. "Jake," he said slowly, like he was scolding a child, "don't make a scene. This is about family. Your sister needs stability, and you're in the best position to provide it." I looked around the room. Everyone was staring at me, waiting for me to cave. That was my role, wasn't it? To give in, to play along, to sacrifice. My mom wouldn't meet my eyes. Lily leaned back in her chair, confident that I'd fold. But I didn't. "No," I said, louder this time, my voice shaking but steady enough. "I'm not putting my name on anything for her. She's an adult. She can handle it herself." The silence that followed was suffocating. Then my dad's face hardened completely. "Ungrateful," he spat. After everything we've done for you. We raised you, put a roof over your head, and this is how you repay us? Your sister deserves your support. That line, after everything we've done for you, hit me like a punch. Because what had they really done? They'd given me a childhood where I was overlooked, ridiculed, and dismissed. They'd given me a family where love was conditional and loyalty meant obedience. And now they wanted to use me as collateral for Lily's next chapter. I felt the weight of years pressing down on me. Every small slight and insult, every time they'd chosen her over me, crystallizing into this one moment. Something inside me snapped. I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. You've never supported me, I said, my voice low but sharp. Not once. And now you expect me to risk everything for Lily? Forget it. Gasps. Murmurs. My dad's face went red, his hand gripping the armrest like he wanted to crush it. Lily rolled her eyes dramatically. You're being so selfish, Jake. It's just a signature. Why do you have to make everything about you? I stared at her, and for the first time in my life, I didn't see my sister. I saw the person they had molded her into, entitled, spoiled, convinced that the world owed her. And I realized in that instant that the betrayal wasn't just in their assumption. It was in the fact that they had planned it all without even asking me, fully confident I'd just play my role. I left that night without another word, the sound of their voices chasing me out the door. As I sat in my car, shaking with anger, I knew something fundamental had changed. The invisible thread that tied me to them, the one I'd clung to despite everything, had finally snapped. And for the first time, I wasn't just angry. I was done. The drive home that night felt endless, like every streetlight was spotlighting the fact that I no longer belonged anywhere. My hands gripped the wheel so tightly my knuckles ached, but my chest felt hollow, like something vital had been scooped out. I had always known, deep down, that I wasn't valued the way Lily was, but having it confirmed so publicly, being volunteered for a lifetime of debt and responsibility without even being asked, was different. It wasn't just favoritism anymore. It was betrayal. When I got back to my apartment, I didn't turn on the lights. I just sat in the dark, staring at the faint reflection of myself in the window. I looked older, tired, like someone who had been fighting a battle he couldn't even name for years. The silence pressed against my ears, and for the first time in a long time, I let myself feel it all. The anger, the humiliation, the grief. I sat there until the sky outside began to lighten, and even then, I couldn't move. The days that followed were a blur. I went to work, went through the motions, but I was a ghost in my own life. Meals lost their taste, sleep came in fragments. My phone buzzed constantly, missed calls, voicemails, messages piling up. At first, I ignored them, but curiosity got the better of me one evening. Jake, you're being ridiculous, my mom's voice said on the voicemail, tired and impatient. Your dad only wants what's best for both of you. Stop making this harder than it needs to be. Then Lily's text, you've always been so dramatic. It's literally just a signature. Grow up. And my dad's final message, blunt and cold. If you can't step up as a brother, don't bother calling yourself part of this family. Each word chipped away at me. Not because I believed them, but because part of me had always wanted to. Part of me had always hoped that if I tried harder, if I stayed quiet, if I gave enough, they'd eventually see me. And now, staring at those messages, I realized they never would. I hit my lowest point about a week later. I was at work, sitting at my desk, staring blankly at an email I couldn't bring myself to finish. My chest felt heavy, my thoughts looping in circles. What was the point? Why keep trying to prove myself to people who had already decided I was nothing? I excused myself, locked myself in the bathroom, and just sat on the floor with my head in my hands. For a terrifying moment, I wondered if this was all there was for me, being the shadow, the backup plan, the forgotten son. But as the hours passed, something inside me shifted. Not dramatically, not like a lightning bolt of clarity, but slowly, like a seed cracking open underground. I thought back to that night with the cake, to the silence that followed my dad's words. I thought about the lease, about how casually they had decided my future for me. And it hit me. If I kept playing along, if I kept trying to win their approval, this cycle would never end. I started taking small steps to distance myself. At first, it was just ignoring calls. Then I stopped going to Sunday dinners. When my mom texted me to say they were disappointed, I didn't reply. When Lily called to scream about how I'd ruined her apartment plans, I put the phone down and walked away. Each time, the guilt came, but it was weaker than before. Instead, I poured myself into my own life. I stayed later at work, started running in the mornings just to clear my head, even reconnected with an old friend I hadn't seen in years. It was strange at first, living without the constant background noise of their demands, but slowly, I began to breathe easier. Still, the pain lingered. Every now and then, I'd catch myself staring at my phone, half expecting an apology that would never come. At night, I'd lie awake, replaying every moment, every word, wondering if I'd been overreacting all along. That was the hardest part, not the betrayal itself, but the way it twisted my sense of reality, making me question whether I was allowed to feel hurt at all. But deep beneath the pain, a quiet determination began to take root. I wasn't sure what form it would take yet, but I knew I couldn't go on like this. If they saw me as nothing more than a resource, then maybe it was time I stopped being one. The rock bottom wasn't just about hitting the lowest point. It was about realizing there was only one way left to go: up. The turning point didn't happen overnight. It never does. But little by little, I started to feel like I was clawing my way out of a pit I'd been trapped in for years. At first, it was small things: waking up early and going for a run before work, finally tackling the pile of dishes that had been sitting in my sink, eating meals that weren't just takeout. It sounds mundane, but when you've been living under the shadow of people who make you feel worthless, every small victory feels like a rebellion. Work became my anchor. I had always been reliable at my job, but now I threw myself into it with a kind of focus I didn't know I had. Projects that used to overwhelm me, I started breaking down into steps. I stayed late, not because I had to, but because I wanted to see what I was capable of. And slowly, people noticed. My boss started giving me more responsibility, and for the first time, I didn't shy away from it. I embraced it. A few months after that disastrous dinner, I was called into a meeting I thought would just be another routine check-in. Instead, my boss smiled and said, "Jake, we've been really impressed with your performance. We'd like to promote you to team lead." The words hung in the air like they weren't real. Me, a leader? I walked out of that office with a new title, a pay raise, and something I hadn't felt in years: validation. With the extra income, I started fixing up my apartment. I bought a proper desk, framed some photos, even painted the walls a color I actually liked. For once, my space reflected me, not some shadow of who my parents expected me to be. I invited friends over, and for the first time, I didn't feel embarrassed to let them see where I lived. I could breathe in my own home. The more I built my own life, the less power their words had over me. When my mom called to guilt trip me about missing another Sunday dinner, I didn't feel that same pang of guilt. When Lily texted to brag about her amazing new apartment she had somehow convinced another relative to help her secure, I didn't spiral. I just put the phone down and went back to my own life. It was around this time I reconnected with Marcus, an old friend from college. He reminded me of who I used to be before the constant criticism wore me down. We started meeting up for coffee, then dinners, and before I knew it, I had a circle of people who valued me for who I was. It felt strange, almost foreign, to be around people who actually listened when I spoke, who didn't dismiss my achievements or turn them into jokes. And with every passing week, I felt myself changing. The heaviness that had followed me for years started to lift. I began to see myself not as the backup plan, but as someone capable, someone who deserved respect. The very things my family had used against me, my independence, my resilience, my ability to figure things out on my own, were the qualities that were now helping me rise. The best part? Opportunities kept coming. A senior manager pulled me aside one afternoon and said, "You have a sharp mind for strategy. Ever thought about moving into project management?" It was like doors I never even knew existed were suddenly swinging open for me. And for the first time in my life, I didn't hesitate to walk through them. But even as my world expanded, there was always a shadow at the edge. Family ties, no matter how frayed, don't just vanish. My mom still left voicemails dripping with disappointment. My dad occasionally sent curt texts about how I was abandoning the family. Lily made passive-aggressive posts online that I knew were about me. They hadn't changed. They probably never would. The difference was that now, I wasn't shrinking under it. I was growing, building something that was mine. And deep down, I started to understand that success wasn't just about proving them wrong. It was about proving to myself that I'd been right all along, that I was worth more than the scraps they tossed me. Still, there was a part of me that wasn't satisfied with just walking away. Every time I thought back to that night, my dad's smug announcement, Lily's smirk, the way they all assumed I'd play my role, I felt a quiet fire building. I didn't want to just move on. I wanted them to see. I wanted them to finally understand that the son they dismissed, the brother they used, wasn't theirs to control anymore. And whether they liked it or not, the balance of power was starting to shift. It was during this new chapter of my life, when I was finally gaining my footing, that the pieces for something bigger started to fall into place. The rise wasn't just about me feeling stronger. It was about me finally seeing how much leverage I actually had, leverage I hadn't realized before. One of the first cracks in their carefully built illusion came through Lily herself. For someone who was always painted as the responsible one, her life outside the family glow wasn't quite as polished. I heard from a mutual acquaintance, someone who worked at the same store Lily had just left, that she'd been caught skimming money from the register. They didn't press charges, but she had been quietly let go. Of course, when she told the family, she spun the story differently. She had quit because she was too good for retail. My parents ate it up, praising her for knowing her worth. That's when I realized something important. The golden pedestal Lily stood on was built entirely on the narratives they chose to believe. Not on facts, not on achievements, on stories. And if the truth ever came out, that pedestal would crack. At the same time, my own career was expanding faster than I had expected. The promotion had been just the beginning. I found myself sitting in meetings with senior executives, presenting ideas that were actually taken seriously. One afternoon, my boss leaned across the table and said, "Jake, you have a knack for seeing the bigger picture. We're considering you for a project that could put you in line for a senior management role within the year." That night, I sat in my apartment, the city lights glowing through the window, and felt the weight of something I hadn't felt before. Power. Real power. The kind that didn't just make my life better, but could shift the balance in the family dynamic that had always been skewed against me. The timing of everything couldn't have been more ironic. Around the same period, I started getting subtle hints from my mom that my parents were struggling financially. She'd make offhand comments at dinner, little slips like, "Your dad's been so stressed with the mortgage," or "It's been hard keeping up with all of Lily's expenses." At first, I brushed it off as her usual guilt tripping. But when I dug a little deeper, quietly, through some old contacts who knew the property market, I learned that my parents had refinanced the house twice. They were stretched thinner than they wanted anyone to know. And then came the kicker. Lily's amazing new apartment wasn't going so well either. She'd landed in over her head, splurging on furniture and clothes she couldn't afford, and now she was barely scraping by. I knew this because one evening, out of nowhere, she texted me, "Hey Jake, could you spot me some cash until next month? Just a little. I'll pay you back, promise." I stared at that message for a long time. The sister who had laughed at me, who had smirked while my dad announced I'd co-sign her lease, was now coming to me directly for money. Not to dad, not to mom, to me. That's when it all started to click. For the first time, they needed me more than I needed them. My job was steady, my income was growing, and my independence had made me untouchable in ways they hadn't foreseen. Their golden child was starting to crack, and their foundation, financially and emotionally, wasn't nearly as stable as they made it seem. I didn't respond to Lily right away. Instead, I sat with the message, turning it over in my mind. They had always treated me as expendable, as a safety net they didn't have to thank. But now, with them in need and me in a position of strength, I saw something I'd never allowed myself to see before, the potential for control. And it wasn't just about saying no. It was about deciding when to say yes, and on whose terms. For years, they had dictated the rules. Now, I was starting to understand that I had the chance to flip the script entirely. That quiet fire inside me, the one that had been growing since the night of the cake, burned hotter than ever. I wasn't ready to make my move yet, but the board was set. I had pieces they didn't even know I held. And when the time came, I would make sure the game didn't play out the way they expected. The chance to make my move came sooner than I expected. It was late on a Wednesday when my phone lit up with my dad's name. For a moment, I almost let it go to voicemail, but curiosity got the better of me. I answered, and his voice was different, lower, less commanding. "Jake," he started, not with anger, not with disappointment, but with something that sounded uncomfortably close to pleading. We're in a bit of a situation. Could you come by this weekend? We need to talk. If this had been a year earlier, I would have jumped at the chance to help, to prove myself. But now I leaned back in my chair, listening to the silence stretch before I finally said, "I'll think about it," and hung up. By Saturday, I showed up, not for them, but for me. I wanted to see it firsthand. The house I'd grown up in, once spotless and put together, now looked worn. Paint chipped along the windowsills, the lawn unkempt. Inside, the tension was thick. Mom sat at the kitchen table, wringing her hands, while Dad paced. Lily was there too, arms crossed, eyes darting between them like a spectator waiting for the main event. Dad cleared his throat, trying to summon the authority he used to command so easily. "We've hit a rough patch financially. The mortgage, some other expenses, things are tight. And Lily, well, she's struggling with her rent too." He gestured vaguely toward her, as if that explained everything. Then he looked straight at me. "You're doing well now. We thought maybe you could help us out. Alone, just to get things back on track." There it was. The moment they'd all assumed would come eventually. The golden child faltering, the parents cornered, and me, the expendable one, expected to step in. I let the silence hang, watching them squirm. My mom spoke next, her voice trembling just enough to tug at the edges of guilt. "Jake, it's not much. You'd barely even feel it. And you know, family helps family." That phrase again. Family helps family. But family had never helped me. I folded my arms, meeting my dad's eyes. "Interesting," I said slowly. "Because the last time we spoke about family helping family, it was about me co-signing a lease I never agreed to. Or the time you told me to skip my own birthday cake so Lily's friend could have some. Or when my accomplishments didn't matter because Lily would do better." I leaned back in my chair, letting the weight of each memory sink into the room. Funny how family only seems to need me when it benefits you. My dad's jaw tightened, but he didn't speak. Lily rolled her eyes, muttering, "You're being so dramatic, Jake. It's just money." That was my opening. Calmly, without raising my voice, I said, "You're right, Lily. It is just money. And I've worked hard for mine. Harder than any of you ever gave me credit for. So if you're asking for help, it won't be on your terms. It'll be on mine." Their faces shifted, confusion, then shock. My mom blinked rapidly. "What do you mean?" I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table. "I'll consider helping, but not until I see some accountability. Lily, you tell the truth about why you lost your job. Dad, you admit that you've treated me like less than family for years. And Mom, you stop pretending that silence makes you innocent. Otherwise, you'll figure it out on your own." The room went dead quiet. For once, they weren't in control of the script. I was. My dad sputtered, "You can't just." "Yes, I can," I interrupted, steady and calm. "Because here's the difference. I don't need you anymore. But you clearly need me. So if you want my support, it comes with honesty and respect. If that's too high a price, then this conversation is over." It was the first time I'd ever seen them truly at a loss for words. Lily shifted uncomfortably, her confidence slipping. My mom's lips parted, but no excuses came out. And my dad looked smaller than I'd ever seen him, like the weight of years finally caught up to him. I stood, pushing my chair back slowly. "Think about it," I said, heading for the door. "Because I won't ask twice." As I walked out of that house, the same one I had left on my birthday with a jacket and a lump in my throat, I felt something I'd never felt before: control. The power they'd held over me for nearly 3 decades was gone. And now, the balance had shifted completely. The real question wasn't whether I'd help them. It was whether they could swallow their pride enough to ask me the right way. They didn't call right away. That silence was telling enough. My family wasn't used to being challenged, least of all by me. For weeks, I went on with my life. Work flourished. My new role in management solidified. And with the promotion came a salary that gave me breathing room I'd never had before. I filled my time with people who valued me, friends who cheered when I succeeded, colleagues who respected my voice. For once, I wasn't looking over my shoulder, waiting for my family's approval. But then, inevitably, the cracks in their world widened. One afternoon, my mom showed up at my apartment unannounced. Her face was drawn, her clothes less put together than usual. She stood in the doorway holding a folder of papers. "Jake," she said, her voice strained, "the bank is threatening foreclosure. We're months behind. We need you." I let her in, offered her a seat, and calmly flipped through the documents. They were worse off than I had imagined. Debts stacked, payments missed, interest rates climbing. Years of favoritism, of funneling resources toward Lily, of living beyond their means, had caught up to them. When I looked up, my mom's eyes were glossy. "Please, you're our only hope. You've always been so strong." That word, strong, wasn't lost on me. It was the first time she had ever used it to describe me. I leaned back, folding the papers neatly. "I told you before, Mom. If I help, it's on my terms. Has anything changed since then?" Her silence was answer enough. She couldn't bring herself to admit the truth, to acknowledge the years of neglect and manipulation. She left with the folder still in her hands, tears trailing down her cheeks. For once, I didn't chase after her. A week later, Lily called. This time, her tone was different, not smug, not entitled, but panicked. "Jake, they're going to lose the house. Dad's health isn't good, and Mom's falling apart. Please do something." I paused, letting her desperation sink in. "Why don't you handle it, Lily? You've always been the favorite. Surely Dad has faith in you." Her voice cracked. "I can't. I don't have the money. I never did." And there it was, the golden child stripped of her shine, admitting the truth at last. In the end, the foreclosure went through. They lost the house I grew up in, the very place where I had been dismissed, overlooked, and humiliated. I drove past it once, weeks after it was emptied, and saw strangers moving in. There was something poetic about it. The walls that had witnessed every slight against me now belonged to people who would never know my story. My parents moved into a cramped rental on the edge of town. Lily bounced from one apartment to another, each time a little worse than the last. The pedestal they'd placed her on had crumbled, and for the first time, they had to face the consequences of their choices. As for me, I never gave them money, not out of cruelty, but because I realized it wasn't my responsibility to clean up the mess they had made. They had gambled on Lily being their savior and dismissed me as irrelevant. And in the end, it was their own blind favoritism that undid them. The last time I saw my dad, months later, he looked smaller than I remembered. We stood outside, awkwardly silent, until he finally muttered, "You did good for yourself, Jake. Better than we thought." It wasn't an apology. Not really. But it was the closest he'd ever come to admitting the truth, that he'd been wrong about me all along. I looked him in the eye, calm and steady. I always knew I would. And with that, I walked away, not with bitterness, but with clarity. I wasn't the forgotten son anymore. I was the one who had survived, risen, and built a life on my own terms. The cake, the cosign, the years of being overlooked, none of it mattered anymore. Because in the end, they had lost everything they held on to, while I had gained the only thing that ever mattered, freedom. And that was my final slice. I'm Marvin, I'm 24, and last weekend I realized just how invisible I am to my own family. It hit me in the face like a bucket of ice water. No big screaming match, no dramatic fight, just a quiet, humiliating moment that told me everything I needed to know about where I stand with them. Growing up, my parents were always loud about how much they loved us equally. They'd say it at every birthday, every holiday, every casual Tuesday dinner. "We don't play favorites," my dad used to say, clapping my brother on the back after another baseball trophy. But even as a kid, I could feel the difference. My older brother, Dylan, was the golden child. Straight A student, star athlete, everyone's favorite dinner guest. I was the quiet one, the kid who loved books and built little robots out of scraps in the garage. I didn't get in trouble, didn't cause problems, but it never felt like that counted for much. When Dylan graduated high school 3 years ago, it was like a royal coronation. My parents rented out a banquet hall. There were balloons, banners, a DJ, and what must have been 100 people in the room cheering for him. The night ended with a huge reveal. They rolled out the garage door to show Dylan's surprise, a shiny $30,000 car with a bow on it. My mom cried. My dad looked proud. Dylan acted modest, but couldn't hide his grin. I clapped with everyone else, pretending to be happy, but I remember going to bed that night staring at my ceiling and thinking, this is the standard now. This is what graduating means in this family. Fast forward to last weekend, my turn. I walked across the stage, accepted my degree in computer engineering, and felt this swell of pride. For years of late nights, side jobs, ramen dinners, and grinding through classes that made my head hurt, I did it. I texted my parents to let them know I'd be coming by after the ceremony. They said, "Sure, we'll have something waiting for you." When I got there was no party, no relatives, no banners, just my parents sitting at the kitchen table with a leftover grocery store cake, already half eaten, and a $20 gift card for a restaurant I don't even like. Dylan was there too, leaning against the counter scrolling on his phone, looking bored. I just stood there for a second, thinking maybe it was a joke, maybe the real surprise was coming later. But my mom smiled like she'd just done me a favor and said, "Be happy we remembered it all. You know how busy we are." I felt this cold anger rise in my chest. I didn't yell. I didn't throw the cake in the trash or say anything dramatic. I just took out my phone, snapped a picture of the celebration, the half-melted frosting, the crooked gift card envelope, and put my phone back in my pocket. "Thanks," I said, forcing a smile. "I appreciate it." I went upstairs, grabbed the overnight bag I'd packed the night before, because some part of me must have known, and walked right back out. Dylan didn't even look up. My parents didn't follow me. That night, I signed a lease on a tiny studio apartment across town. The place is nothing special, peeling paint, old carpet, but it's mine. I spent hours cleaning it, laying out the air mattress I'd just bought, putting my diploma on the counter like a trophy. By morning, my phone had 32 missed calls, 18 texts, and 3 voicemails from my parents asking where I was, why I stormed off. How could I do this to them on such a special day? My dad's last text said, "We're disappointed in you." I stared at the screen for a long time. Disappointed in me? After years of watching them bend over backward for Dylan and toss me scraps? That was the moment something shifted. I decided I wasn't going to be quiet about this anymore. And that's where things started to get complicated, because once I stopped playing along, my parents started showing just how far they were willing to go to keep me in my place. I didn't respond to any of their messages that morning. For the first time in my life, I felt like I had the power to just not engage. No polite explanations, no groveling to make peace. I just put my phone face down and made a pot of coffee in my new apartment. The place still smelled faintly of bleach from cleaning the night before, and it was quiet, eerily quiet, but I liked it. There was no sound of Dylan blasting music down the hall, no parents arguing over whose turn it was to mow the lawn. Just me and my coffee and my thoughts. Around noon, my mom finally drove over. She didn't knock. She just let herself in because I'd stupidly given her the address a month ago when I'd mentioned I was thinking about moving out. She stood in the doorway of my tiny kitchen, looking around like she'd stepped into a crime scene. "This is where you ran off to," she said, her voice tight. "You made your father sick with worry last night." I didn't look up from my coffee. "I'm fine. Clearly, you know where I am, so you don't have to worry anymore." She huffed like I'd just insulted her. "We wanted to celebrate you last night, Marvin, but you didn't even stay for cake." I laughed, an ugly, sharp sound that startled even me. "You call that a celebration?" I asked. "Dylan got a car and a hall full of people. I got a melted cake and a gift card for $20. You really think that's the same thing?" Her face hardened immediately. "So this is about Dylan again. Marvin, life isn't about keeping score. Your brother works hard. He deserves what he gets." I felt my jaw tighten. "I worked hard too, Mom. You just didn't notice." She shook her head and muttered something under her breath about me being ungrateful. Then she turned and left, slamming the door so hard my picture frame rattled on the counter. That afternoon, Dylan sent me a text. No context, just a picture of him washing his car, the car they gave him for graduating, with the caption, "Don't be salty, little bro." I stared at it for a full minute before blocking his number. The next few days were strange. I still had to go over to my parents' house to pick up a few boxes of stuff I hadn't moved yet, and every time I walked in, the air felt heavier. My dad wouldn't look at me. My mom would only speak to me in clipped sentences. Dylan, of course, made it worse, tossing little comments over his shoulder like, "Hey, don't scratch the paint on my car, Marvin," or, "You should be grateful Mom even remembered your graduation." The final straw came 3 days later when I stopped by to grab the last of my things, my books and the small 3D printer I'd bought with my own money. As I carried the box out to my car, I heard my mom talking on the phone in the kitchen. She didn't know I was still there. "I don't know what's wrong with him," she was saying. "He's just jealous. Always has been. Dylan would never pull something like this. Marvin's always been different. Ungrateful. Maybe this will teach him some responsibility." That one word, different, hit me like a slap. I stood there in the hallway, clutching the box until my knuckles went white. I wanted to walk in there and confront her, but instead I just left, loaded the box into my car, and drove away without saying a word. That night, I got a long text from my dad. It said that if I didn't apologize for disrespecting my mother, they were going to reconsider the financial help they'd promised me for grad school. That's when I realized what this really was: control. It wasn't about family or love or fairness. It was about making sure I stayed in my assigned role. The quiet kid. The afterthought. The one who never rocked the boat. I didn't sleep much that night. I just lay there staring at the ceiling of my new apartment, listening to the hum of the fridge. I thought about all the times I'd stayed silent growing up. The birthdays where Dylan got a mountain of gifts and I got a single card with $10 in it. The vacations where I got stuck on the pull-out couch while Dylan got the actual bed. The arguments where my parents would take his side before I'd even finished explaining my point. It wasn't a one-time thing. It was a pattern. And now they were using money as a leash to pull me back into line. The next morning, I went back to my parents' house one more time, not to beg, but to get the last piece of leverage they had over me. My name was on one of their bank accounts, the one they'd set up for my future education. I withdrew every cent and opened my own account at a different bank. It wasn't much, just a few thousand, but it was mine now. When my mom found out later that day, she called me furious. "You had no right to do that," she yelled. "That money was for school." "It's still for school," I said calmly. "I just don't want you holding it over my head." She hung up on me. That's when the texts from extended family started rolling in. My aunt texted me saying my mom was crying her eyes out because I was being cruel. My grandmother left me a voicemail saying I should just apologize and come home. Even Dylan chimed in again, calling me dramatic and selfish. I realized then that they weren't just trying to punish me. They were trying to rewrite the story. In their version, I was the villain who'd abandoned my poor, loving family over nothing. And maybe that would have worked before. Maybe I would have caved, apologized, gone back to pretending everything was fine. But this time, something in me had snapped. I didn't reply to a single one of those messages. I went to class. I went to work. I came home to my little apartment and cooked my own dinner. I could feel the distance growing between me and them with every silent day, and strangely, I felt lighter because of it. But then came the moment that really set everything in motion. The moment that turned this from a quiet family disagreement into something bigger, something I couldn't ignore. It happened the following weekend at Dylan's belated graduation party, a party I hadn't been invited to but ended up seeing with my own eyes. I wasn't planning to go to Dylan's graduation party. In fact, I had purposely made plans with a couple of friends from school to get lunch that day, just so I wouldn't have to think about it. But then one of those friends posted a story on Instagram, and there it was, my parents' backyard, packed with people, music blasting, a buffet table groaning under catered food. It was exactly like Dylan's first graduation party 3 years ago. Only this time, there was one key difference. As I clicked through the story, my stomach twisted. My parents were smiling and laughing. Dylan was hamming it up with his friends, and in the middle of the yard was a massive banner that read, "Congratulations, Dylan and Marvin." I actually sat there staring at my phone for a full minute trying to process what I was seeing. My name, on a banner, at Dylan's party. I wasn't invited. They had thrown my graduation party, the one I never got, as a footnote to his. I don't even know how I got there. One second I was sitting on my couch, the next I was driving across town, hands gripping the wheels so hard they hurt. I didn't even knock when I got there. I just walked into the backyard, and it was like a movie scene where the music stops. "Oh, look who decided to show up," Dylan called, grinning like this was all some big joke. "We saved you some cake." I looked around and saw it. A small cake on the table with "Congrats M" scribbled on it like an afterthought. Next to it was a stack of envelopes, which I quickly realized were cards from family friends, probably full of money. The kind of cards I should have been handed at my graduation party. I turned to my mom, who was standing there holding a tray of drinks, looking like she'd just been caught red-handed. "You threw my graduation party without me?" I asked, my voice flat. "It wasn't like that," she said quickly, putting the tray down. "We just thought it would be nice to combine things. You know, make it a family event." "A family event?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You didn't even invite me. You didn't call. You didn't text. I had to find out from a friend's Instagram story." My dad finally stepped in, holding up a hand. "Calm down, Marvin. We were going to tell you. When? I demanded. After it was over? People were staring now, whispering to each other. I could feel the heat rising in my face, my heart pounding in my ears. This is exactly why we didn't make a big deal out of your graduation, my mom snapped suddenly. You always find a way to make everything about you. I laughed, loud and bitter. About me? It was about me. Or at least, it was supposed to be. But I guess Dylan can't have one single day that doesn't turn into a parade, huh? Dylan rolled his eyes. Here we go, he muttered. Drama Marvin is back. That's when I saw it. A set of keys sitting on the gift table, shiny and new with a little dealership tag still attached. I knew that dealership. I knew those tags. No, I said, my voice suddenly cold. You didn't. Dylan grinned and held them up like a trophy. Pretty sweet, huh? Mom and Dad upgraded me to the new model since I'm heading off to grad school. I stared at him, then at my parents, then back at the banner with my name on it. The banner, the cake, the cards, it was all a prop. They weren't celebrating me. They were using my graduation as an excuse to throw Dylan another party, get him more gifts, and make themselves look like doting parents who treated their kids equally. And then my mom said the thing that snapped whatever fragile thread of patience I had left. You could have had a nice day too, Marvin, she said, her tone icy. But you chose to make this difficult. You're the one who moved out. You're the one who's been avoiding us. This is what happens when you separate yourself from the family. I stood there, rooted to the spot, every nerve in my body buzzing. Separate myself from the family? As if I hadn't been excluded for years in 1,000 small ways before I ever packed a single box. Something in me broke right then. I wasn't sad. I wasn't even angry anymore. I was done. I walked over to the gift table, picked up the cake with "Congrats M" on it, and set it gently back down, just enough to make it clear I wasn't taking it. Then I turned to face everyone watching me. Congratulations, Dylan, I said evenly, my voice carrying across the yard. Enjoy your new car. And Mom, Dad, don't ever use my name to make yourselves look good again. Then I turned and walked out, ignoring the whispers, ignoring Dylan's fake cough laugh behind me, ignoring my dad calling my name. I got in my car, drove back to my apartment, and sat there in silence for a long time. I thought I was used to their favoritism. I thought I'd built up a tolerance for it after years of being the afterthought. But seeing my name on that banner, watching them parade around like they'd done me a favor by throwing me a party I wasn't invited to, that cut deeper than anything before. And that night, lying on my air mattress staring at the ceiling, I realized something I hadn't let myself admit before. This wasn't just favoritism. This was erasure. They didn't want me to feel celebrated. They wanted me to play my part, smile in the background, and make Dylan's spotlight shine brighter. That was the night I stopped caring about keeping the peace. And that was the night I decided if they wanted a separation from the family, I was going to give them one they'd never forget. The drive back from the party felt longer than it was. I kept the windows rolled up even though the air was hot and stale, letting the silence press down on me. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. By the time I reached my apartment, I felt hollow, like someone had scooped everything out of me and left me running on fumes. I didn't cry that night. I just sat on the floor with my back against the wall, staring at my phone screen as the notifications rolled in. Group chat messages from relatives. Heard you caused a scene, Marvin. Was that really necessary? Text from my mom. You embarrassed us in front of everyone. You need to grow up. A single, smug message from Dylan. Thanks for making my party memorable. I turned the phone off and tossed it face down on the counter. The next morning, I woke up with that heavy feeling in my chest, the kind you get when you realize the bad thing wasn't just a dream. My apartment felt even smaller than usual. The air mattress creaked as I sat up, and for a moment I wondered if I'd made a mistake moving out. Maybe my parents were right. Maybe I was being dramatic. Maybe if I had just kept my head down, stayed quiet, none of this would have blown up. But then I remembered the banner with my name on it, the smug grin on Dylan's face, the way my mom had said, "This is what happens when you separate yourself from the family." Like my pain was a punishment I'd earned. I got up, made coffee, and sat by the window staring out at the parking lot below. For the next few days, I barely spoke to anyone. I went to class, clocked in at my part-time job, came home, microwaved dinner, and went to bed. No music, no TV, just silence. I felt like a ghost haunting my own life. One night, I stopped by my parents' house to grab a package that had been delivered there by mistake. It was late, after 9 p.m., and I thought maybe I'd get in and out without seeing anyone. But when I pulled into the driveway, I saw Dylan's new car parked there, shining under the streetlight like some kind of trophy. I stood there for a long moment, staring at it. It wasn't about the car, not really, but it represented everything. The years of favoritism, the parties, the vacations I was left out of because there wasn't enough room, the quiet, constant message that I was second place. When I stepped inside, the house smelled like dinner, something good, something home-cooked. My mom was at the sink, washing dishes, and when she saw me, her face tightened like she'd bitten into something sour. "You could have called first," she said without turning off the water. "I just came for my package," I said, my voice flat. She dried her hands and crossed her arms. "You know, Marvin, if you'd just apologize, all of this could go away. Your father and I have tried to be patient, but this silent treatment is getting ridiculous." "Silent treatment?" I let out a sharp laugh. "Mom, I'm not giving you the silent treatment. I'm just done playing along." "Playing along with what?" she demanded. "With this," I said, gesturing around the kitchen. "With pretending everything's fine. With pretending I'm not the second choice every single time. You didn't even invite me to my own graduation party." Her expression didn't soften. "You made that decision when you walked out after your ceremony. Actions have consequences, Marvin. You could have stayed, you could have celebrated with us, but you made your choice." I felt something in me shut down. "Yeah," I said quietly. "I guess I did." I grabbed my package and walked out, ignoring her calling after me. That was the last time I set foot in that house for weeks. The loneliness got worse before it got better. My grandparents called to say they were disappointed in me. My aunt posted a passive-aggressive Facebook status about kids these days having no respect. People I barely knew messaged me asking if the rumors were true, that I'd stormed out of the party, that I was cutting myself off from the family. At work, I started picking up extra shifts just to stay busy. The hours were long, and the pay wasn't great, but it kept me out of my head. I saved every spare dollar, cooking cheap meals and skipping nights out with friends. I told myself it was for grad school, but deep down I knew it was about something more, about building a life that didn't rely on my parents' approval or their money. On the nights I wasn't working, I started researching. Not just grad programs, but jobs, real jobs, ones that could give me a shot at standing on my own 2 feet faster than I'd planned. I spent hours scrolling through job boards, revising my resume, and sending out applications. I didn't tell anyone, not my friends, not my parents. And slowly, something shifted. One night, after a particularly rough shift, I came home to find a letter slipped under my apartment door. It was from my dad. I sat down on the floor and read it under the yellow glow of my cheap lamp. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even kind. It was a lecture about family, about respect, about how they had done everything for me and I had repaid them by humiliating them. It ended with a warning. "If you continue down this path, don't expect our support when you need it most." I set the letter down and stared at it for a long time. That's when it hit me. I didn't need their support. Not anymore. The thought was terrifying and freeing at the same time. That night, I opened my laptop and filled out 3 more job applications. Then I researched apartments closer to downtown, not because I planned to move right away, but because I wanted to know what my next step could look like. I started writing down everything. Every slight, every unfair moment, every time they'd used money or guilt to keep me in line. Not because I wanted to stew in it, but because I wanted a record. I wanted to see it all laid out in black and white, so I could remind myself why I couldn't just go back and pretend nothing had happened. The list got long, longer than I expected. It wasn't just the party. It was years of small cuts, years of being told to be the bigger person, of watching Dylan be praised for things I had done first but quieter. Years of hearing, maybe next year, when I asked for things that magically appeared for him without question. And the more I wrote, the more something inside me solidified. This wasn't just about surviving anymore. This was about taking control of my story. Because if I didn't, they were going to keep writing it for me, and they were going to keep painting me as the problem. I didn't know exactly how yet, but I knew I wasn't going to stay on the outside looking in forever. And just as I started to feel steady again, something happened that would push me from quiet planning into action, something that made it clear they weren't done trying to pull me back under their thumb. Things didn't change overnight, but little by little, I could feel the fog lifting. It started with one job application turning into an interview. I sat across from the recruiter in a borrowed dress shirt, palms sweaty, trying not to think about what would happen if I failed. But I didn't fail. 2 weeks later, I was offered a full-time position at a local tech startup doing junior development work. The pay wasn't mind-blowing, but it was more than I'd ever made in my life, and it came with benefits, health insurance, PTO, even a small stipend for continuing education. When I got the offer letter, I didn't call my parents. I didn't post about it online. I just sat in my apartment, staring at the email, and let out a laugh that sounded more like a sigh of relief. This was it. The first brick in the wall I was building between their control and my future. With my new job came a new routine. I started waking up early, making breakfast instead of skipping it, biking to work instead of driving my old car that was constantly on the verge of breaking down. The apartment slowly transformed. The air mattress was replaced with a rail bed. I bought a small secondhand couch, and I hung my diploma on the wall. For the first time, the place felt less like a hiding spot and more like a home. My mental space started to shift too. I still had bad days, moments where I'd see a family photo pop up on social media and feel that old ache in my chest, but they didn't consume me the way they used to. The silence from my parents became easier to bear. In fact, I started to welcome it. It meant no guilt trips, no manipulation, no one dangling money or approval over my head like bait. Dylan, of course, couldn't resist sending little digs every now and then. He'd text a picture of himself on vacation, paid for by my parents, or a photo of his car with some snide comment like, "Hope your little studio apartment's treating you well." I stopped responding. Eventually, I stopped opening them altogether. The more distance I put between myself and them, the more clearly I saw the pattern. I wasn't overreacting. I wasn't the problem. I was just finally refusing to play the part they'd written for me. About 6 months into my new job, I got a raise. Nothing huge, but enough that I could start saving in a way that actually made a difference. I opened a separate account just for that money and started watching it grow, little by little. There was something empowering about seeing those numbers climb, knowing they represented my independence. I also started saying yes to more things outside of work. Dinners with coworkers, weekend hikes, even joining a local robotics club. At first it felt strange, like I was borrowing someone else's life, but soon I realized I was building my own circle, my own support system. These were people who knew me not as Dylan's brother or my parents' quiet kid, but as Marvin, the guy who built a working drone out of spare parts just for fun, who stayed late to help a coworker debug a nightmare piece of code, who actually had opinions worth hearing. And then came the opportunity that changed everything. One Friday, my manager called me into her office. She told me she'd been impressed with my work ethic and problem-solving skills, and there was an opening on a bigger project, one that came with a significant pay bump and the chance to travel for training. It was the kind of role people twice my age were fighting to get. I said yes before she even finished her sentence. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. I was working late, learning new systems, sitting in on meetings I never thought I'd be invited to. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was thriving. I was getting noticed for the right reasons. Somewhere along the way, I stopped checking my phone for messages from my parents. The constant pressure, the guilt, the tightness in my chest, it all started to fade. When my mom did finally text, asking if I was coming to Dylan's birthday dinner, I read it, set my phone down, and kept working. I didn't feel guilty. I didn't even feel angry. I just felt free. The biggest shift, though, happened inside me. One night after work, I sat on my couch with a notebook and looked over the list I'd started months ago, all the moments, all the ways they'd minimized me, dismissed me, pushed me to the sidelines. I added the latest thing, throwing my graduation party without inviting me, and then I put the pen down and stared at the page. For the first time, I didn't just feel like I was cataloging my pain. I felt like I was building a case. Because the truth was, my parents and Dylan still thought I'd eventually come crawling back. They thought this was a phase, that I'd run out of money or hit some wall that would force me to beg for their help. But that wasn't going to happen. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized I didn't just want to move on quietly. I wanted them to see me succeed, to see what I could do without their favoritism or control, and I wanted them to feel the loss of the version of me they thought they could keep in their shadow. That was the first night I seriously thought about revenge. Not petty revenge, not yelling in their face revenge, but something bigger. Something that would make them stop and realize they couldn't rewrite the story anymore. I didn't know how yet, but I knew I was getting closer. Every paycheck, Every new skill I learned, every project I completed, it was all leading somewhere. And then, just when I thought I was finally at peace with staying out of their orbit, they did something that pulled me right back in. Something that made it clear they weren't done trying to control me, and something that gave me the perfect opening to put my plan into motion. It happened on an otherwise normal Thursday afternoon. I just wrapped up a meeting and was heading out for a late lunch when my phone buzzed. It was a text from my aunt, the one who's usually the family gossip, but, ironically, the only relative who ever treated me like an equal. "Hey Marvin, just so you know, your mom mentioned at dinner last night that she's putting together a family fund for Dylan's grad school tuition. She was complaining about how you took your share early and left them in the lurch. Thought you'd want to know." I just stood there on the sidewalk, staring at the message. My share? The money I withdrew months ago had been mine, in my name. But of course, they were spinning it like I'd stolen something. At first, I was just angry. Angry that they were still talking about me behind my back, still framing me as the problem. But then a thought struck me. If they were pooling money for Dylan's tuition, that meant there was an actual fund somewhere. A family account. Something I hadn't heard about until now. When I got home that night, I sat down with my laptop and started digging through old emails. Sure enough, I found one from almost a year ago with my name on it. My parents had CC'd me when they opened a family education account. Back then, I'd skimmed it and ignored it because I was too busy with finals. But now, reading it carefully, I realized something. They had listed me as a secondary account holder, probably thinking they were being fair. I felt my pulse quicken. Technically, I still had access. I didn't touch a single cent, not yet. But I logged into the account just to see what I was working with. The numbers staring back at me made me sit back in my chair. It wasn't millions, but it was a serious amount of money, more than enough to cover Dylan's tuition, plus a cushion. I closed the laptop and just sat there, thinking. For years, my parents had used money as a way to control me, to reward Dylan and punish me, to dictate what I could and couldn't do, to remind me that my future was tied to their generosity. But now, I had the ability to pull the rug out from under their perfect plan. That night, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let them use that money as a weapon against me anymore. I didn't act right away. Instead, I started planning. Over the next few weeks, I quietly got my ducks in a row. I met with a financial advisor at my bank, explaining the situation in general terms, that I had access to funds, that I wanted to make sure everything I did was legal and documented. He confirmed what I suspected. As a listed account holder, I had full rights to withdraw or move the money. That gave me options, but I wasn't in a rush. I wanted this to be more than just a withdrawal. I wanted it to be a statement. Around this time, work offered me the chance to attend a professional conference out of state. I jumped at the opportunity. Not only did it mean more training and exposure, but it also gave me time to think away from the noise of my family's drama. I spent evenings in the hotel room sketching out ideas, writing in my notebook, thinking through every possible outcome. By the time I came back, I had a plan forming in my head. Step 1, strengthen my position. I kept working hard, kept stacking savings, kept building a life that had nothing to do with my parents' approval. I got another small raise, started investing a little, and even signed up for night classes that would make me more competitive for future promotions. Every step I took made me less dependent on them, and more confident that I could pull this off. Step 2, watch and wait. I didn't tell anyone about the account, not even my closest friends. Instead, I monitored it quietly. I could see deposits coming in, contributions from relatives, from my parents, all earmarked in their minds for Dylan's bright future. Every time I saw the balance grow, I felt that old mix of anger and determination tighten in my chest. Then, one evening, I got another text from my aunt. "Heads up, your mom says they're planning to surprise Dylan with a tuition payment next month. Big family dinner and everything." There it was, my window. I spent the next 2 weeks preparing. I double-checked every document, made sure I had screenshots of the account listing me as a legal holder, made sure the transfer I was planning would leave a clear paper trail. I wasn't going to give them the chance to say I'd done anything shady or behind the back. And then, 3 days before the big dinner, I moved every last dollar out of the family account and into a trust with my name on it. The funds were now legally mine, protected, and completely out of their reach. When I got the confirmation email, I just sat there staring at it, my heart pounding. I wasn't scared. I wasn't even guilty. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was holding the pen. But this wasn't just about taking the money. It was about showing them that they couldn't use me as a prop anymore. That if they wanted me in their picture-perfect family moments, it would have to be on my terms. So when my mom texted me the next day, a cheery message inviting me to Dylan's special dinner, I smiled. I told her I'd be there. Because this time, I wasn't going to walk away quietly. This time, they were going to see exactly who I'd become and exactly how much power I now had. The dinner was set for Saturday night, at the same nice restaurant where we'd celebrated Dylan's first graduation years ago. I got there early, not because I was eager to see them, but because I wanted to control the tempo. I wanted to be settled in, calm and collected, before they walked in and saw me there. The hostess showed me to the long table near the back. It was already set with white tablecloths, polished silverware, and those little candles restaurants use to make things look fancier than they are. I sat down, ordered water, and pulled out my phone one last time to make sure everything was in place. The transfer had gone through days ago. The account now showed a balance of exactly $0. When my parents arrived, they looked surprised to see me already seated. My mom's face brightened in that brittle, performative way she always used when company was around. "Marvin, I wasn't sure you'd actually come," she said, sliding into the chair across from me. "I said I'd be here," I replied evenly. Dylan arrived last, of course, strolling in like the guest of honor. He clapped me on the shoulder as he passed, smirking. "Wow, look who crawled out of his cave. Must be nice to take a break from sulking." I didn't rise to the bait. I just smiled and said, "You're right. It is nice." The first half hour was filled with small talk, mostly my parents bragging about Dylan's plans for grad school. I let them have their moment, nodding occasionally, sipping my water. I could feel the tension buzzing under the surface, but I kept my face neutral. Finally, after the appetizers were cleared, my dad raised his glass. "Well," he said, smiling proudly at Dylan, "your mother and I have a little surprise. We know how hard you've worked, and we want you to start grad school with no worries about money." Dylan grinned, clearly expecting this. My mom reached into her bag and pulled out a card. I assumed some kind of ceremonial check or letter confirming the tuition payment. "That's actually what I wanted to talk about tonight," I said, setting my glass down carefully. Everyone turned to look at me. "What do you mean?" my mom asked, her smile faltering. "I mean the family account," I said, keeping my voice calm and level. "The one you've been collecting money in for the past year. The one with my name on it." My dad's expression changed immediately. "Marvin." I held up a hand. "Don't worry, I didn't spend it. Not a single cent. But I did move it into a trust in my name." The table went silent. My mom blinked at me. Dylan actually laughed. "You're kidding, right?" "No," I said simply. "I have full legal rights as an account holder. I consulted a financial advisor, documented everything, and transferred the funds into a secure trust. They're no longer available for you to use as you see fit." My mom's face flushed. "How dare you? How dare I what?" I interrupted, my tone sharper now, but still controlled. "How dare I stop you from using my name to fund a party I wasn't invited to? From pretending to treat us equally while funneling everything to Dylan?" "This money was for your brother's education," my dad said, his voice rising. "Then maybe you should have opened an account with only his name on it," I replied. "You included me, and I'm done letting you use that as leverage." Dylan's smirk had faded now. He leaned back in his chair, frowning. "So what? You're just going to keep it?" Out of spite, I looked him dead in the eye. "No, I'm going to use it for my future. For grad school, for investments, for building a life I actually want. One that doesn't revolve around waiting for scraps from this family." My mom opened her mouth to argue, but I cut her off. "This isn't up for debate. I'm not here to fight. I'm here to make sure you all understand that I'm not your scapegoat anymore. You don't get to punish me by holding money over my head. You don't get to use my milestones to make yourselves look good while ignoring me. Not anymore." The silence at the table was deafening. Other diners were starting to glance over, sensing the tension. I leaned back in my chair, calm now. "You always told me actions have consequences. Well, so do yours." Then I did something I hadn't planned until that very moment. I reached into my bag, pulled out an envelope, and slid it across the table toward Dylan. He frowned, opened it, and stared at the piece of paper inside. It was a copy of the trust paperwork with the balance printed clearly at the top. "That's what you won't be getting," I said evenly. My mom looked like she'd just swallowed a lemon. My dad's jaw was tight. Dylan slammed the envelope shut and shoved it back toward me, his face red. "You're unbelievable," he said. "Maybe," I said with a shrug. "But I'm finally free." I stood up, placed enough cash on the table to cover my meal, and nodded toward the waitress. "Thanks for dinner." Then I walked out, leaving them sitting there in stunned silence. By the time I reached my car, my phone was already buzzing. Calls, texts, all of it. I didn't answer a single one. I drove home with the windows down, the night air cool on my face, and for the first time in years, I felt light. But this wasn't just about taking the money. This was about changing the balance forever. And judging by the flood of messages that came over the next 24 hours, some furious, some pleading, I had succeeded. And yet, I had one last thing to do. One last step to make sure they never tried to paint me as the villain again, and to leave them with no doubt that I was done playing the role they'd assigned me. When I woke up the next morning, my phone was still buzzing like it hadn't stopped all night. I had 42 unread texts and 16 missed calls. At first, I ignored them. I made coffee, showered, and sat down at my kitchen table to eat breakfast in silence. But then, curiosity got the better of me. I opened the messages and started reading. My mom had sent a flurry of texts, alternating between guilt trips and accusations. "Do you have any idea how much you humiliated us last night? This isn't how family treats each other. You should be ashamed of yourself. We were counting on that money for Dylan's tuition. How could you do this to your own brother?" My dad's messages were shorter, but angrier. "Grow up. You don't understand what sacrifice means. You're throwing this family away over your ego." And then there were Dylan's. "Hope you're proud of yourself. You just ruined my future. This is why no one takes you seriously. Mom cried herself to sleep last night. You happy?" I stared at the screen for a long moment, then set the phone down and took a slow sip of my coffee. I wasn't happy, exactly, but I wasn't guilty either. For the first time in years, their words didn't feel like shackles. That afternoon, my aunt called. She was the only one I answered. "I can't believe you did that," she said, though her tone sounded more impressed than angry. "I didn't do anything wrong," I said calmly. "It's my legal right." "I know," she admitted after a pause. "And honestly, good for you. Your parents have been playing favorites for as long as I can remember. Maybe this will finally wake them up." "Maybe," I said, though I didn't actually believe it. The fallout started almost immediately. My parents posted a long, emotional message on Facebook about being betrayed by those closest to you. It was vague, but everyone in the extended family knew exactly who they were talking about. Some relatives took their side, sending me messages about forgiveness and family unity. Others stayed silent, which told me they understood more than they were willing to say out loud. And then came the real consequence. My parents canceled Dylan's car insurance and told him he'd have to start making the payments himself. I found out from my aunt, who said Dylan had thrown a fit so loud the neighbors heard him. Apparently, he'd accused my parents of ruining his life by letting me steal his money, which led to a screaming match that ended with Dylan storming out of the house. I didn't celebrate, but I won't lie, I felt a sense of justice in knowing they were finally dealing with the mess they'd created. A week later, I got an email from my dad. It wasn't long, but it was the first time I'd seen him acknowledge the situation without anger. "Marvin, your mother and I have been talking. We still think what you did was wrong, but we realize we might have made you feel less important over the years. That was never our intention. If you want to talk, we're willing to listen." I read it twice, then closed the laptop. I didn't reply right away. Instead, I took a few days to think. Did I want to talk? Did I want to let them back into my life now that I'd finally carved out some peace? On the third day, I sent a short reply. "I'm open to talking, but if we do, it has to be on equal ground. No yelling, no guilt trips, no dismissing my feelings. If you can do that, we can try." They didn't respond right away, but eventually my mom sent back a simple, "Okay." I didn't rush over. I didn't set a date. I let the silence sit, because for once, it was on my terms. In the meantime, I kept building my life. The trust stayed intact, my savings grew, and I started seriously looking at grad schools. I had options now, real ones, and no one could take them away from me. The real moment of closure came a month later. I got another invitation to the house, this time for a family dinner. Against my better judgment, I went. When I arrived, the atmosphere was different, quieter. My mom looked tired, my dad looked older, and Dylan was uncharacteristically silent. We sat down at the table, and for the first time, no one made a joke at my expense. No one compared me to Dylan, No one minimized what I'd done. Halfway through the meal, my dad cleared his throat. "We're not perfect," he said slowly. "And maybe we should have done better at making you feel like you mattered as much as your brother." It wasn't a full apology, but it was more than I'd ever gotten before. I nodded, not smiling but not angry either. "That's a start," I said simply. The rest of the dinner passed without incident. When I left that night, my mom hugged me at the door, stiff, hesitant, but it was something. Dylan barely looked at me, but for once, he didn't say anything smug. When I got back to my apartment, I stood in the doorway for a moment, looking at the life I'd built, the job, the savings, the independence. I felt lighter than I had in years. I walked over to the wall where my diploma hung, straightened it, and whispered to myself, "I'm not invisible anymore." And that was the end of it. Not a dramatic blow-up, not a fairy tale reunion, just the quiet, steady knowledge that I'd finally reclaimed my life. That night, as I turned off the lights and got ready for bed, my phone buzzed one last time. It was a text from my dad. "We're proud of you, Marvin." Truly. I set the phone down, smiled to myself, and went to sleep. For the first time in a long time, it wasn't just a good night. It felt like the beginning of a better life. You ever wonder how long someone can take being treated like garbage before they finally snap? Because I sure as hell have. My name's Ethan, and for as long as I can remember, I've been the family afterthought. If my older brother Daniel was a king, then I was the dirt beneath his throne. My parents, my aunts, my uncles, even my grandparents, they all worshipped the ground he walked on. Me? I was the invisible one, the scapegoat, the disappointment. Daniel was the golden child. Handsome, successful, engaged to some picture-perfect woman named Emily. He was the type of guy who'd smile at you in public but talk behind your back the second you left the room. He got everything he ever wanted. New car at 16. Full college tuition paid for while I had to take out loans. A high-paying job handed to him through one of Dad's connections. And now, he was having the wedding of the century. And me? I was invited, sure, but not as a guest. A week before the wedding, Mom called me. I knew something was up immediately because she never called unless she needed something. "Ethan, I assume you're coming to the wedding," she said in that voice, the one that sounded like she was barely tolerating me. "Yeah," I muttered. "Good. We need you to help out during the event." I frowned. "Help out how?" "You know, just small things. Watching the kids, making sure everything runs smoothly, maybe helping in the kitchen if needed." I clenched my jaw. "So, you don't actually want me to be a guest? You just want free labor?" She scoffed, like I was being dramatic. "It's Daniel's big day, Ethan. The least you can do is pitch in. You're not doing anything important anyway." I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood. I should have expected this. Of course, they didn't see me as part of the celebration. I wasn't a guest. I wasn't family. I was just the unpaid help. "Fine," I said through gritted teeth. Not that she noticed my anger. Good. "And please don't embarrass us. Just stay out of the way and don't make a scene." That was it. The final straw, because they had no idea. They had no idea that this wedding, the one where they expected me to be their errand boy, was about to be a day they'd never forget. I arrived at the family estate 2 days before the wedding. Mom and Dad owned this massive house in the countryside, the kind of place that looked like it belonged in a magazine. They had money, plenty of it, but none of it had ever been spent on me. The second I walked in, I knew I was an outsider. Daniel was at the center of it all, laughing with Emily, surrounded by relatives fawning over him. He had that smug, self-satisfied grin on his face, the one that always made me want to punch him. Mom barely acknowledged me when I walked in. "Oh, Ethan, you're finally here. Like I was late. You'll be sleeping in the guest house." Not in the main house. Wouldn't want the family failure tainting the golden boy's special weekend. I gritted my teeth and nodded. The next 2 days were a nightmare. I wasn't a guest. I was a servant. I was handed lists of things to do. Pick up dry cleaning, move chairs, carry boxes, watch the little kids while everyone else drank champagne and laughed about what a magical day it was going to be. Daniel made it worse. Whenever he saw me struggling with something, he'd smirk and throw in a passive-aggressive comment. "Careful with that, Ethan. Wouldn't want you screwing up my wedding too. Man, you really look like you belong in the service industry. You should be grateful Mom and Dad even invited you." I wanted to strangle him. Emily wasn't much better. She was beautiful, sure, but she had that same fake sweetness Daniel had. The one that made you think she was nice, until she opened her mouth. At dinner the night before the wedding, she turned to me with a pitying smile. "Ethan, you must be so happy for Daniel. He's so successful. I bet it's inspiring. I stared at her. Sure. She giggled. So, do you have a girlfriend? No. Oh. Her eyes flickered with something judgment? Amusement? Well, maybe someday. Daniel's always said you had trouble with confidence. Daniel snickered. He doesn't have trouble with confidence, babe. He just never had much going for him. Everyone at the table laughed. I sat there, gripping my fork so tightly my knuckles went white. I could feel it building, the anger, the humiliation, the years of resentment boiling under my skin. They thought I was nothing. But tomorrow, they were going to learn exactly who they'd been messing with. That night, as the house buzzed with final preparations, I sat alone in the guest house, staring at the ceiling. I had spent years swallowing their cruelty, letting them treat me like trash, playing the role of the quiet disappointment. But not anymore. Because tomorrow, at the wedding, in front of all their friends, their high society guests, their perfect little world, I was going to humiliate Daniel in a way he'd never recover from. I smiled to myself in the darkness. This wedding was going to be unforgettable. The morning of the wedding was pure chaos. Guests were arriving. The estate was buzzing with caterers, florists, photographers, all working to make Daniel's perfect day even more perfect. And me, I was shoved into the background like always. I woke up early, dressed in the suit my mom had picked for me, cheap, ill-fitting, and nothing like Daniel's custom-tailored tuxedo. No surprise there. When I stepped into the main house, the first thing I heard was Mom barking orders. Ethan, what took you so long? There's so much to do. I clenched my jaw. Like what? Like setting up chairs, greeting guests, making sure the kids don't run around like wild animals. Just be useful for once. Be useful for once. I swallowed the insult. Not yet. Not yet. The humiliation continued. Everywhere I turned, people treated me like I was just some hired help. My relatives barely acknowledged me except to hand me more work. Ethan, go tell the DJ we want different music. Ethan, can you make sure the food is out on time? Ethan, don't get in the photos, okay? Meanwhile, Daniel strutted around like a damn prince, basking in the attention. Emily was glued to his side, looking flawless in her designer wedding dress. Her bridesmaids cooed over her, while Daniel's groomsmen cracked jokes and toasted to the best guy they knew. And then, just when I thought my patience was wearing thin, Daniel decided to rub salt in the wound. I was standing near the reception area, watching as people took their seats, when he strolled over with his signature smirk. Hey, little bro. His tone was condescending as ever. Big day today. Gotta admit, you must be feeling pretty lucky. I frowned. Lucky? Yeah, lucky to be here at all. He chuckled, clapping me on the shoulder. I mean, let's be real. If it weren't for Mom and Dad, you wouldn't even be invited. Not exactly wedding material, you know. His friends laughed. My blood boiled. I wanted to wipe that smug look off his face, but I wasn't ready. Not yet. So I just forced a tight smile. Yeah, lucky me. Daniel didn't notice my clenched fists. He was too busy basking in his own importance. And that's when I saw it. Daniel's phone. He had it in his hand, half distracted as he texted someone while talking to his groomsmen. And just for a second, I saw the name on the screen. Anna. My stomach twisted. Because Anna wasn't his fiancée. She was his side chick. See, I'd known for a while. Daniel was cheating on Emily. And not just with one woman, he had a whole damn rotation. I found out months ago, purely by accident. I'd gone to a bar downtown after work one night, just wanting a drink to clear my head. And that's when I saw him. Daniel, with his arm wrapped around some blonde who definitely wasn't Emily. I didn't say anything that night. I didn't confront him. I just sat there, watching as he flirted, touched, and eventually left with her completely shameless. And later, when I started digging, I realized she wasn't the only one. Daniel had been cheating on Emily for years. Different women, different places. And the worst part? He didn't even try to hide it. He was so sure no one would ever say anything. Why? Because he was Daniel, the golden child, the perfect son, the one who could do no wrong. And the family? If they ever found out, they'd cover for him. No question. But Emily? She had no idea. She thought she was marrying the perfect man, the devoted fiancé, the loyal partner. She didn't know the truth, but she would. Soon. By the time the ceremony started, my patience was running razor thin. The guests were seated. The music was playing. The massive floral arch at the altar looked like something out of a fairy tale. Daniel stood there, grinning, adjusting his tuxedo, while Mom and Dad beamed with pride in the front row. I stood at the back. Alone. I was supposed to stay out of the way, remember? The bridesmaids made their way down the aisle. Then the flower girl. And finally, Emily. The crowd gasped as she appeared. She looked beautiful, absolutely glowing. And as she walked toward the altar, her eyes locked onto Daniel's. She looked at him like he was her entire world. I clenched my fists. Because she had no idea what kind of man she was marrying. The ceremony began. The officiant spoke. And Daniel? He stood there lying through his teeth, pretending to be the perfect groom. Emily smiled at him, hanging on to every word. The crowd sighed dreamily. My parents wiped fake tears from their eyes. And me? I was seething. Because they didn't know. They didn't know that Daniel had spent the night before his wedding texting another woman. They didn't know that he'd been cheating for years. They didn't know that this entire day, this massive, expensive, over-the-top event, was built on nothing but lies. But they were going to find out. Soon. Because I wasn't just going to let Daniel get away with it. No. I was going to make sure this wedding was a day he'd never forget. After the ceremony, everyone flooded into the reception area, a massive outdoor setup with chandeliers hanging from white tents, tables decorated with absurdly expensive floral arrangements, and a dance floor so polished it looked like glass. And, of course, a head table. A long, beautifully decorated table where Daniel, Emily, my parents, and the important people would sit. I, of course, had no seat there. Instead, I was expected to sit at the far end of the venue, near the catering staff. I walked toward my designated table, trying to ignore the bubbling rage in my chest, when I heard Daniel's voice behind me, loud, arrogant, mocking. Man, I really dodged a bullet. I stopped in my tracks. Slowly, I turned. Daniel was standing with a few of his groomsmen, drink in hand, grinning. His friends were laughing, like they were in on some kind of joke. Dodged a bullet? One of them asked. Daniel smirked. I mean, can you imagine if I actually married Anna? My blood ran cold. Anna, the woman he had texted last night. The side chick. One of many. Dude, you were seriously thinking about it? Another groomsman laughed. Daniel shrugged. For, like, half a second. But come on, let's be real. Emily's the better deal. Her family's loaded, and she's so in love with me she'd never suspect a thing. His friends burst out laughing, and Daniel? He took a casual sip of his drink, like he hadn't just admitted to marrying Emily for her money. Like he hadn't just admitted to playing her like a fool. I felt something inside me snap. It wasn't just the cheating. It wasn't just the lying. It was the fact that he was so damn proud of it. Emily was standing just a few feet away, chatting with guests, completely unaware that her new husband was mocking her behind her back. And my parents? They were laughing too. Like this was normal. Like it was funny. And suddenly, I realized something. They all knew. Maybe not about the cheating, maybe not about Anna specifically, but they knew Daniel was a selfish, manipulative piece of garbage. And they didn't care. Because in their eyes, he could do no wrong. But that was about to change. Because I was going to make sure of it. I took a slow, deep breath. I could feel my hands shaking. Not with fear. With anticipation. Daniel had no idea what was coming. Neither did my parents. Neither did Emily. But they would. And when I was done, this wedding would go down in history. I turned back toward the reception, my mind racing, heart pounding. I had everything I needed. All the proof. All the leverage. And now? It was just a matter of when. I glanced up at the stage, where the microphone stood, waiting for the next speech. A slow smile spread across my face. Soon, I stood there, gripping my glass so tightly I thought it might shatter. Daniel was still laughing, still grinning like he hadn't just exposed himself as the absolute garbage human being he was. His friends clinked their drinks together, throwing around more jokes about Emily, about how easy this whole thing had been for him, about how stupidly blind she was. My stomach twisted. I turned my gaze toward Emily, still glowing, still completely unaware, chatting with relatives who were just as oblivious as she was. The wedding had been perfect so far. Too perfect. But that was about to change. I took a slow sip of my drink, letting my mind race through all the ways I could make this go down. Daniel's confidence was dangerous. He wasn't just arrogant, he was certain that nothing could touch him. That was the thing about golden children, wasn't it? They thought they were untouchable. That no matter what they did, no matter who they hurt, their family would always shield them from the consequences. And why wouldn't he think that? Look at my parents, laughing along, clinging to his every word like it was gospel. Look at my relatives, all gathered around him, praising him, celebrating him. Meanwhile, I was just there. Always just there. I set my drink down, forcing my hands to unclench. Not for long. The music softened, and the MC took the mic, announcing the start of the speeches. The room turned its attention toward the head table, where my father stood, fixing his suit before stepping forward with his glass raised. To my son, my pride and joy, Daniel, he began, voice thick with genuine admiration. I don't think I've ever been prouder in my life than I am today. He turned toward Daniel, smiling like he had personally crafted him into the perfect man. I wanted to vomit. From the moment he was born, I knew he was going to be special. And look at him now. A strong, hardworking, devoted man, marrying the woman of his dreams. My mother dabbed at her eyes, pretending to be emotional, while Daniel sat there smirking. I remember when he was just a kid, my father continued, always so determined, always standing out in everything he did. He was the best at sports, the best at school, the most charming, the most responsible. I swear I felt my eye twitch. And now, look at him, proving once again that he deserves every good thing life has to offer. The room clapped, murmurs of agreement rippling through the crowd. I saw my cousins nodding, my aunts whispering about how wonderful Daniel was, how lucky Emily was to have him. And me? I just sat there, swallowing down every last piece of resentment that had built up over the years. Then, my father turned his gaze toward me. And, of course, he added, we have Ethan. The shift in tone was instant. A slight pause. A hesitation. The kind that made it clear that I wasn't even supposed to be mentioned. A few people turned to glance at me, almost like they'd forgotten I existed. I wasn't even mad. I had spent my whole life being an afterthought. My father gave me a small nod, like he was being forced to acknowledge me. Ethan has always, well, he's been there for Daniel. Supporting him. Standing by him. And we're glad he's here today to celebrate his brother's big day. That was it. That was my entire acknowledgement. The clapping was noticeably weaker this time. A few polite nods. A couple of glances in my direction before people turned their attention right back to Daniel. I exhaled slowly. Daniel, the ever-smug bastard, raised his glass, flashing me that same condescending smirk he had given me all my life. Thanks for coming, bro, he said, voice dripping with mockery. Really means a lot. I stared at him. He was baiting me. He wanted me to react. He wanted me to lash out, to cause a scene, to be the bitter, jealous brother so he could turn around and be the victim. And for a moment, I almost did. For a moment, I almost stood up and shattered my glass against the floor and told everyone exactly what kind of man Daniel really was. But no, that was too easy. I forced a smile, nodding. Of course, I said, voice calm. Wouldn't miss it for the world. Daniel grinned, thinking he had won. Thinking I was just going to sit there and take it. He had no idea. The speeches continued. More praise. More gushing about how wonderful, how incredible, how perfect Daniel was. Then Emily's father stood up, making his toast, his voice full of genuine love for his daughter. And to Daniel, he said warmly, I know you're going to take care of her. I know you're going to be the loyal, devoted husband she deserves. I almost laughed. Daniel lifted his glass again, smiling, nodding, pretending. Then he glanced at me. Just for a split second. A flicker of amusement. Of challenge. And that's when I made my decision. I wasn't just going to ruin this wedding. I was going to end him. I took a slow breath, feeling the weight of the moment settle over me. The wedding hall was buzzing with conversation, laughter, and the clinking of glasses as people mingled and celebrated. Celebrated him. Daniel, sitting there with his perfect smile, his perfect life, his perfect web of lies, completely at ease because he knew that nothing could touch him. But he was wrong. I stood up. The sound of my chair scraping against the floor wasn't loud, but in the brief pause between speeches, it cut through the noise just enough to make a few heads turn. I felt the shift in the air, the subtle change in energy as people realized I was about to speak. I saw Daniel's eyes flicker with amusement, his lips curling in that familiar, condescending smirk that made my blood boil. I picked up my glass, raising it slightly. I just want to say a few words, I announced. My voice was steady, calm, too calm. It was the kind of calm that preceded a storm. The kind of calm that made people listen, made people wonder what was coming next. Daniel leaned back in his chair, completely relaxed, like this was all part of the show. My parents, however, looked less thrilled. My mother's grip on her napkin tightened. My father shot me a warning look, as if to say, don't embarrass the family. Oh, don't worry, Dad. I won't embarrass the family. I'll just destroy the illusion you've built around your precious son. I turned my gaze toward Emily, who was smiling politely, completely unaware. First of all, Emily, I said, You look absolutely stunning today. I mean that. I don't think I've ever seen a happier bride. I saw her blush slightly, Daniel squeezing her hand as if he was some adoring husband-to-be. I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. And you're marrying Daniel, the man of the hour. The man everyone here has spent the last hour telling us is loyal, devoted, responsible, and just an all-around perfect guy. I let the words linger for a second. I mean, who wouldn't be lucky to have a man like Daniel? A few chuckles from the crowd. Daniel's smirk widened. Glad you finally see it, bro, he said, voice dripping with arrogance. I ignored him. But, since we're here to celebrate honesty, love, and commitment, I think it's only right that we all get to know the groom a little better. I turned, making eye contact with Daniel. He still wasn't worried. Not yet. After all, Emily, if you're spending the rest of your life with him, it's only fair you know everything about the man you're marrying, right? Now, the mood shifted. I felt it. A few nervous laughs, a few side glances. My mother sat up straighter, my father's jaw clenched. And Daniel? For the first time tonight, his smile faltered. Just slightly. I took my phone out of my pocket. Casual. Unhurried. And then I turned back to Emily. I just have one question, I said, tilting my head slightly. Do you know a woman named Sophie? Dead. Silence. Emily frowned, confused. Sophie? She repeated. And that's when I saw it. The first crack in Daniel's mask. It was quick, a flicker of something in his eyes, a tiny, barely noticeable stiffening of his posture. But I caught it. I smiled. Yeah, Sophie, I said, unlocking my phone with a few taps. You see, she's someone very special to Daniel. I turned the screen toward Emily, showing her the messages, screenshots. Hundreds of them. Texts, photos, videos. The color drained from her face. My mother gasped. People started whispering. My father stood up halfway, like he was about to storm over and stop me, but I stepped back, raising a hand. No, let's not interrupt. This is important. I turned back to Emily, my voice gentle now. She wasn't my enemy. She was just another person Daniel had fooled. Go ahead, I said. Read them. Her hands trembled as she took the phone. She scrolled. Her eyes widened. Her breathing grew unsteady, and then she looked up at Daniel. What is this? Her voice was barely above a whisper, but the shock, the betrayal, the sheer devastation in it was deafening. Daniel shot to his feet. Ethan, what the hell is this? His voice was shaking now, no longer amused, no longer in control. This is a joke, right? Some kind of stupid prank. Oh, no, it's real, I said, my voice sharp. Very real. Unlike the little fairy tale you've been selling to Emily and her family. I turned, addressing the entire room now. You see, Daniel here isn't just a charming, devoted fiancé. No. He's a cheating, lying piece of garbage. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Relatives started murmuring, looking between Emily and Daniel. Judging. Watching. Emily was still frozen, still staring at the messages. Then, suddenly, she slammed the phone down on the table. How long? Her voice cracked. How long have you been cheating on me? Daniel ran a hand through his hair, glancing around, realizing that everyone was watching. His confidence was gone. Emily, babe, just listen. How long? He hesitated, just for a second. But it was enough. Emily let out a shaky breath, then turned toward the crowd, toward her family, toward her father, who looked like he was about 3 seconds away from murdering Daniel. Then, she stood up. Without another word, she grabbed her bouquet, took a deep breath, and walked out. A stunned silence followed. Then, all at once, the wedding exploded into chaos. The aftermath was exactly what I wanted. Emily's family tore into Daniel the moment she left. Her father nearly knocked him out before security had to step in. My parents? Oh, they tried to spin it, to blame me, but it was too late. The evidence was there. The whispers had started. Daniel's perfect image? Shattered. Emily called off the wedding immediately. She moved out that same night, blocked him on everything, and from what I heard, her family made sure he paid for every single expense. As for my parents, they never forgave me. They called me vindictive, cruel, a disgrace. But I didn't care. The extended family started seeing through their lies. People stopped treating them like royalty. And Daniel? He tried to bounce back, of course. But his name? Ruined. His job? Gone. His reputation? Destroyed. Turns out, cheating on your fiancé and getting exposed at your own wedding isn't a great look. The golden child finally fell from grace. And I? I walked away without looking back.